Chapter 747. Yes, the ultimate secret. The thunder punishment, Saint King said slowly. There are too many secrets hidden in this world. Some of them are things that even Saint Kings from the ancient times like us are not qualified to explore. This is because those places are too dangerous for us. Lin Feng's eyes widened in disbelief. Even the thunder punishment, Saint King said that those places were dangerous. It was hard to imagine how dangerous those places were. Forget it. It's too early to talk about these things. The thunder punishment, Saint King waved his hand. You should prepare first. I'll bring you to a place a month later. What place? The barren source land. The thunder punishment, Saint King smiled. You should be very interested in that place. Why? Because the barren source land is where connate spiritual treasures are born. Of course, ordinary people are used to calling them Saint King's spiritual treasures. The thunder punishment, Saint King's expression turned serious. You don't have any connate spiritual treasures yet, right? If you're lucky, you might be able to obtain a connate spiritual treasure when you go there. Your strength will also increase by a lot. Connate spiritual treasure. Lin Feng's eyes widened. Really? He had long coveted connate spiritual treasures. Connate spiritual treasures were exclusive to Saint Kings. With a connate spiritual treasure, his strength would increase tremendously. The reason why an Earth Saint King could defeat him was because he had a connate spiritual treasure. His strength would increase tremendously. To a Saint King intent was the most important and fundamental thing. Connate spiritual treasures were second. A Saint King without a connate spiritual treasure would be at a disadvantage if he fought with another Saint King with a connate spiritual treasure. Connate spiritual treasures were also divided into grades. First grade connate spiritual treasures, second grade connate spiritual treasures, and third grade connate spiritual treasures. Including Xing Feng and Lin Hai, there were more than 130 Saint Kings in the world. More than half of them did not have innate spiritual treasures. Only a few of them had third-rate innate spiritual treasures. A few of the top veteran Saint Kings had second-rate innate spiritual treasures. Of the 7 titled Saint Kings, Thunder Punishment Saint King and Suiyang Saint King each had a first-rate innate spiritual treasure and a few second-rate innate spiritual treasures. The other 5 titled Saint Kings only had second-rate and third-rate innate spiritual treasures. Since the ancient times, there had only been over 70 natural spiritual treasures in the world. However, there were over 130 Saint Kings. There were too many monks and too little porridge. There was simply not enough to go around. Furthermore, the 7 titled Saint Kings each had a few natural spiritual treasures. As a result, there were even fewer natural spiritual treasures left. The competition between normal Saint Kings became even more intense. Earth Holy King, what level of innate spiritual treasure is that giant axe? Lin Feng asked curiously. Second rate. The thunder punishment Saint King smiled. It's because of that second-rate innate spiritual treasure that he was able to stand above all the other veteran Saint Kings and enter the ranks of the top veteran Saint Kings. As for that second-rate innate spiritual treasure, he had to pay a huge price in exchange for it from Suiyang Saint King. As for what price he had paid, the thunder punishment Saint King did not elaborate. Lin Feng was speechless. It's actually a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. He was a little impressed by himself. Back then, he actually dared to exchange blows with the Earth Holy King who had a second-rate innate spiritual treasure with his bare hands. His courage was not ordinary. The ignorant were fearless. If Lin Feng had known beforehand that the Earth Holy King had a second-rate innate spiritual treasure, he might not have dared to accept the challenge. If a second-rate innate spiritual treasure was already so powerful, then what about a first-rate innate spiritual treasure that was at the peak of the innate spiritual treasure level? Lin Feng felt the blood in his body boil uncontrollably. A hint of passion flashed in his eyes. I have to remind you of one thing. Although many innate spiritual treasures have been born in the desolate origin land, many places are extremely dangerous. Even if you know that there are innate spiritual treasures in some places, not many people dare to go there. In the past, many saint kings lost their lives because they were unwilling to give up on the innate spiritual treasures so close to them. The thunder punishment saint king's expression turned serious. Therefore, after you go in, it's best that you stay by my side to avoid any unpredictable dangers. If you want to act alone, it's not impossible, but you must be careful. Do not take any chances. That will only cause you to lose your life in vain. Linfeng said in a low voice, I understand. The entrance to the desolate origin land opens once every 10 billion years. This time, it was supposed to open 100 million years ago. However, recently, the Gui demons have been restless and have launched a large-scale attack on the humans. Therefore, all the Saint Kings joined forces to seal the space-time of the entrance to the desolate origin land. However, as time passed, our sealing power weakened and the entrance to the desolate origin land would be automatically unsealed. As a last resort, the human Saint Kings and the Gui demon tribes King Gui reached an agreement to stop the war. We will fight again after the entrance to the desolate origin land is closed. The condition is that we give half of the quota to the Gui demon tribe. It was for this reason that every quota was so precious. Quota? Linfeng was puzzled. The desolate origin land is a very strange place. It can even be said to be the center of this world. The entire world's rules revolve around it. What's more amazing is that only 300 people can enter at a time. After 300 people enter, no matter what method they use, they will be blocked outside by a mysterious force. The Thunder Punishment Saint King explained, in the past, these 300 quotas were in the hands of the humans. However, this time, we have no choice but to give half of the quotas. Therefore, every quota is very precious. Linfeng asked, then how are the quotas allocated? Before you became a Saint King, there were a total of 138 Saint Kings. Excluding Lin Hai and Xingfeng, there were 136. Each Saint King took one quota, so there were 14 quotas left. Of these 14 quotas, Suiyang Saint King and I each took 3. Miao Miao Saint King, Fire Lake Saint King, Earth Titled Saint King, War Saint King, and Life Saint King each took 1. The remaining 3 quotas went to the 3 top veteran Saint Kings, namely Earth Saint King, Hurricane Saint King, and Reincarnation Saint King. Earth Saint King belonged to Suiyang Saint King's camp, Hurricane Saint King belonged to Miao Miao Saint King's camp, and Reincarnation Saint King belonged to Thunder Punishment Saint King's camp. Linfeng was stunned. Then what about my quota? Although he was not a real Saint King, he had the combat power of a Saint King. Moreover, in the eyes of many Saint Kings, he was a newly promoted Saint King. The original 150 quotas had already been allocated. It seemed like there was no place for him. Obviously, he had advanced at the wrong time. Don't worry, I've already prepared a spot for you. The Thunder Punishment Saint King chuckled and said, I have a total of 4 spots. Apart from myself, there are 3 spots left. I have already decided to give all 3 spots to you. As for how to distribute them, it's up to you. Linfeng was shocked. 3 quotas. Without a doubt, every quota to enter the barren lands was extremely precious. Even most Saint Kings only had 1 quota. However, the Thunder Punishment Saint King had given 3 quotas to Linfeng at once. This gift was extremely precious. My lord, I only need 1 quota. You should give the other 2 quotas to others. To Linfeng, 1 quota was more than enough. The Thunder Punishment Saint King raised an eyebrow and looked at Linfeng mockingly. Are you sure you don't want it? Linfeng wanted to nod his head, but the look in the Thunder Punishment Saint Ruler's eyes made him hesitate. He didn't reject the offer immediately. Instead, he asked, My lord, are there any other benefits in the desolate source land? You actually guessed it. The thunder punishment Saint King looked at Lin Feng in surprise. He then nodded and said, "That's right. I have said before that the Barren Lands is the center of the world. It is the hub where the laws of heaven and earth operate. Not only are there innate spiritual treasures in the Barren Lands, but more importantly, the fluctuations of laws are extremely clear. It can increase the speed of one's comprehension and assimilation of laws. Moreover, there is a large amount of mysterious energy. As long as one can refine this mysterious energy, they can strengthen their soul and Saint King will. In other words, whether it was a Saint King or an Earth Saint, one could obtain endless benefits after entering the Barren Lands. This was the most precious thing about the quotas to enter the Barren Lands. As long as one could enter, even if they did not obtain any Saint King spiritual treasures, it would not be a wasted trip. That, my lord, can I take back what I said just now? Lin Feng was not willing to hand over the 3 quotas that he had obtained. Whether it was Jing Ting, Nono, or Huang Wenbing, they could all obtain endless benefits. There was even a chance that they could refine the Saint King Godhead and become a Saint King. For these 3 quotas, Lin Feng did not mind being thick-skinned. Those 3 quotas were originally prepared for you by me. The thunder punishment Saint King did not seem to care about the 3 quotas. If you want them, take them. Lin Feng said gratefully, "Thank you, my lord." He did not know why the thunder punishment Saint King would help him so much. First, he gave him the sword god's palace. Then, he helped him obtain 3 quotas to enter the Barren Lands. Finally, the thunder punishment Saint King used a Saint King fruit to exchange for him. Lin Feng did not believe that the thunder punishment Saint King did not have any ulterior motive. But regardless of the reason, he could not refuse the thunder punishment Saint King's help. He needed the quotas to enter the Barren Lands too much. All right, I have said what I needed to say. There is nothing else to say. The thunder punishment Saint King waved his hand. Sinking Water City is very big. Find a place to rest. I will not speak any more nonsense. Yes, my lord. Lin Feng still had a few questions to ask the thunder punishment Saint King. But since the thunder punishment Saint King had asked him to leave, he could only leave first. There was still a long way to go. He had plenty of opportunities. There was no need to rush. After leaving the palace, Lin Feng stepped onto a street and entered the sword god's palace. Boss. Lin Feng. Master. Jing Ting, Nono, Huang Wenbing, Bai Zhan Feng, and the Thunder Crystal Beast King all gathered around. They were extremely emotional. It was as if they had been separated by life and death. Lin Feng said with a smile, "I did not expect so many accidents to happen. Luckily, I survived." Lin Feng. Jing Ting sobbed as she hugged Lin Feng. She looked so pitiful. "Promise me, don't do this again." Chapter 748. You should still remember what the lightning punishment Holy King said, right? There are a total of 3 spots to enter the desolate land. Other than me, there are 2 spots left. Who wants to go? Lin Feng looked at Jing Ting, Nono, Huang Wenbing, and Bai Zhan Feng. "I'm not going." The 4 of them replied in unison. Hearing their reply, Lin Feng was stunned. "None of you want to go?" The lightning punishment Holy King had already explained the benefits of the desolate land. Jing Ting and the others had heard it loud and clear from the sword god's palace. How could they not want to go? But very quickly, Lin Feng reacted. It wasn't that they didn't want to go, but they wanted to give up their spots to others. "Boss, let sister-in-law and Nuonuo go. I've refined my Saint Godhead, and reaching the late stage Great Earth 9th stage is already my limit. I don't want to waste this quota." Huang Wenbing hurriedly said. "I've also refined my Saint Godhead." Jing Ting shook her head and said, "Lin Feng, let Wenbing and Nono go. After their strength increases, they will be able to help you better." Bai Zhan Feng lowered his head resentfully. Even though he didn't want to go, he was still a little depressed that he was ignored. Why didn't anyone suggest that he go? Even though he would definitely refuse, he would feel a little better if someone suggested that he go. Fortunately, he was more optimistic and didn't go down a dead end. After all, his strength was only at Earth Stage 8. If the quota was given to him, it would be a great waste. Good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Only Jing Ting, Huang Wenbing, and Nua Nua could maximize the benefits of entering the desolate origin land. Since you can't decide, let me make the decision for you. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Nono and the others looked at Lin Feng nervously. Ting Wenbing, you two go. Lin Feng said to Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were stunned, and Jing Ting hesitated. What about Nono? It's better to let sister-in-law and Nono go. Boss, you know that I'm a coward. The wildlands are so dangerous, I don't dare to go. Huang Wenbing shook his head like a rattledrum. Even if you're a coward, you have to go. Lin Feng glared at him. Nono is a demonic beast, and the desolate origin land is of limited help to him. Old White's current strength is still lacking, so the two of you can go in and not waste these 2 spots. Nono chuckled. Since the boss has said so, don't refuse. Then, he joked, you'd better work harder inside. If I overtake you, you'll lose face. It's settled then. Hurry up and go into seclusion to prepare. Right. Lin Feng suddenly thought of something and took out 4 Saint crystals from his space ring, saying, Ting Nono Wenbing, Old Bai, here are 4 Saint crystals, 1 for each of you. Saying so, he tossed the 4 Saint crystals to Jing Ting and the others. Jing Ting and the others caught the Saint crystals and put them into their space rings. They didn't refuse. Jing Ting, Nua Nua, and Huang Wenbing knew that Lin Feng had already comprehended the principles of life to the realm of perfection, so Saint crystals were almost useless to him, so they happily accepted them without the slightest burden in their hearts. Bai Zhanfeng saw Jing Ting and the others accept them, so he also accepted them without saying anything. After a while, Jing Ting and the others went into seclusion, leaving only Lin Feng and the Thunder Crystal Beast King in place. Let's go to the Thunder Mist Sea. In the next moment, Lin Feng controlled the Sword God Palace and flew at an extremely fast speed. With his current speed, it would only take a moment to reach the Thunder Mist Sea if he went all out. With a roar, the Sword God Palace instantly turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. After arriving at the Thunder Mist Sea, Lin Feng removed the Death God's will and stopped pretending to be a Saint King because he knew that the Saint King and the Mastiff King had an agreement. The Saint King couldn't enter the 4 seas, and the Mastiff King couldn't enter the 7 longevity secret lands. Once either side violated the agreement, it would be regarded as a provocation. Before they completely fell out, both the Saint King and the Mastiff King had to abide by the agreement. Fortunately, Lin Feng wasn't a real Saint King and could only be regarded as a half-step Saint King expert. Therefore, he could ignore the agreement. The only thing he needed to do was to remove the disguise of his strength and show his true strength. He also needed to hide his aura and change his appearance slightly so that no one would recognize him as Lin Feng. Thunder Mist Sea. In just 3 days, the Thunder Crystal Beast King had devoured hundreds of thousands and millions of Thunder Crystal Beasts. Its strength had completely recovered, and its body had also returned to its original size. However, Lin Feng was still not satisfied. He continued to lead the Thunder Crystal Beast King to search for Thunder Crystal Beasts in the Thunder Mist Sea and collect 7th grade and above refining materials. 10 days later, after devouring a large number of Thunder Crystal Beasts, the Thunder Crystal Beast King finally made a breakthrough and became the first half-step Saint King after Lin Feng. At the same time, Lin Feng had almost completely plundered the entire Thunder Mist Sea. He had collected more than 80,000 sets of 9th grade refining materials, 160,000 sets of 8th grade refining materials, and 600,000 sets of 7th grade refining materials. However, Lin Feng was still not satisfied. After leaving the Thunder Mist Sea, he went to the Nebula Sea, Eroding Bone Sea, and Death Sea to sweep through. However, in order to save time, he only collected 9th grade refining materials and ignored everything below 9th grade. The 7 titled Saint Kings were all almighty experts from ancient times. Each of them had cultivated independently to become a Saint King. Naturally, they had also experienced the realm of half-step Saint King. However, that was already in the ancient times. Since then, the entire human world had not given birth to a half-step Saint King. Therefore, no one dared to step into the Thunder Mist Sea, Eroding Bone Sea, Nebula Sea, Death Sea, or even the Central Sea region. Saint Kings were restricted by the agreement and could not enter. Experts below half-step Saint King did not dare to enter. If they entered, only death would await them. Therefore, the resources in the 4 seas had not been touched for close to 1 trillion years. In close to 1 trillion years, with the vast area of the 4 seas, the resources produced had reached an extremely shocking level. Lin Feng, the first half-step Saint King in human history, quietly began his sweeping journey. After spending a total of 10 days, Lin Feng was finally satisfied. He stopped his frenzied plundering of refining materials and drove the Sword God's palace to the Shuntian Prefecture's stairway world. At that moment, the refining materials he had collected filled more than 10 top-grade space rings. Among them, there were more than 500,000 sets of 9th-grade refining materials, 160,000 sets of 8th-grade refining materials, and 600,000 sets of 7th-grade refining materials. The materials accumulated in the Thunder Mist Sea, Eroding Bone Sea, Nebula Sea, and Death Sea over 1 trillion years had all benefited Lin Feng alone. With so many high-grade refining materials, it was enough for him to squander freely. As long as he was willing, he could even create an invincible army that was not inferior to the Thunder Army. After leaving the Death Sea, Lin Feng arrived at the Stairway World in just a short while. After entering the Stairway World, Lin Feng chatted with many old friends for a while, then immediately ordered the Thunder Crystal Beast King and the Undying Bird King to clean up the monsters outside the Stairway World so that the people in the Stairway World could go out for a breather and not be attacked by the monsters. Although the Stairway World was safe, it was always the same. If one kept staying there, they would be driven crazy sooner or later. After doing all this, Lin Feng announced that he would go into seclusion. With more than 10 top-grade space rings, Lin Feng entered space number 1. Master. Number 1 appeared beside Lin Feng. As usual, remind me after 10 days, Lin Feng said to number 1. The high-intelligence program of space number 1 only had a timer function when it came to Lin Feng. Yes, Master, number 1 said calmly. Lin Feng sat cross-legged on the ground and began to convert the quality of the materials. He could not convert 7th-grade materials into 8th-grade materials, nor could he convert 8th-grade materials into 9th-grade materials. However, he could convert 7th-grade materials, 8th-grade materials, and 9th-grade materials into pseudo-spiritual treasures. After a while, he released a large amount of Death God's will and began to convert the quality of the materials. After releasing a large amount of Death God's will, Lin Feng stopped and began to slowly restore the Death God's will. In this way, he consumed the Death God's will and restored it at the same time. Pseudo-spiritual treasures gradually piled up beside him. As he operated more and more and became more familiar with it, the time for each material conversion and the time for restoring the Death God's will gradually shortened. Finally, on the 6th day in the outside world, Lin Feng stopped. At this moment, the pseudo-spiritual treasures beside him had piled up into a small hill. Counting carefully, there were more than 3,000 set. 4 more days, Lin Feng asked number 1. After knowing the exact time, he began to refine the pseudo-spiritual treasures. He did not know if he could refine all 3,000 sets of pseudo-spiritual treasures into pseudo-spiritual treasures in 4 days. He could only try his best to refine as many as he could. Of course, if he could successfully refine all 3,000 sets of pseudo-spiritual treasures into pseudo-spiritual treasures, then he would have endless confidence. 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures almost killed an Earth Saint King. Lin Feng did not know how powerful 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures would be. Perhaps, the power of detonating 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures could threaten the life of a conferred Saint King. The Sui-Yang Saint King and the Thunder Punishment Saint King were too powerful. Lin Feng did not expect to be a threat to them at his current stage. However, the Miao Miao Saint King, the Fire Lake Saint King, the Earth Conferred Saint King, the War Saint King, and the Life Saint King were far weaker than the Sui-Yang Saint King and the Thunder Punishment Saint King. If they encountered them alone, detonating 3,000 pseudo-spiritual treasures could really put their lives in danger. Lin Feng did not rest for a moment. He began to refine the pseudo-spiritual treasures. In midair, Lin Feng shot out dozens of law of fusion and law of gravity. Then, he threw in dozens of pseudo-spiritual treasures and started to refine them. Pseudo-spiritual treasures were different from the 9 revolutions Saint armor. The time needed to nurture a pseudo-spiritual treasure was much longer than the time needed to nurture the 9 revolutions Saint armor. Therefore, Lin Feng was not confident that he could refine all the materials into pseudo-spiritual treasures. He could only try his best. 3,180 pieces. When there were only 6 hours left before the 1-month deadline, Lin Feng finally stopped his crazy refinement. Chapter 749. 4 days in the outside world was almost 1,000 years in space number 1. In other words, Lin Feng spent almost 1,000 years to make 3,180 pseudo-spirit treasures. On average, every time Lin Feng refined a pseudo-spiritual treasure, it would take him about 4 months. Luckily, he had space number 1. Otherwise, even if Lin Feng was the greatest legendary weapon forger in history, he wouldn't be able to make so many pseudo-spirit treasures in just 4 days. He wouldn't even be able to make one pseudo-spirit treasure in 4 days, let alone 3,180 pseudo-spirit treasures. Whether it was in the past or now, space number 1 was an indispensable weapon in Lin Feng's hand. With these 3,180 pseudo-spirit treasures, even Sui-Yang Saint King will have to pay a price if he wants to deal with me. Lin Feng finally felt a bit more confident. Although he wasn't confident in killing Sui-Yang Saint King, Sui-Yang Saint King wouldn't be able to ignore the explosion of more than 3,000 pseudo-spirit treasures. He put away all the pseudo-spirit treasures and walked out of space number 1. He called Jing Ting and the others over. No, old Bai, you two can stay in Heaven's Stairway World for now. Lin Feng said to Nono and Bai Zhanfeng, our trip will take at least 1 or 2 months and at most 8 to 10 years. I hope that when we come back, your strength will have increased. Nono waved her little fist. When you come back, I might have become a Saint King. That was what she said, but she wasn't confident at all that she could become a Saint King in such a short time. Okay, then our Nono will become a Nono Saint King, the great Nono Saint King. Lin Feng smiled. Bai Zhanfeng said solemnly, Lin Feng, you guys be careful too. Lin Feng nodded. Don't worry, we will be careful. Soon, Lin Feng and the other two said goodbye to Nono and Bai Zhanfeng and left. After a while, Lin Feng drove Sword God Palace into Star Ocean Lake. Sinking Water City. You guys are here. The Thunder Punishment Saint Ruler glanced at Lin Feng and the other two. That little guy didn't come? Before Lin Feng could answer, he reacted again. That's right. He's a demon beast, so the desolate spring land is of limited help to him. He flicked his sleeves and said, there are still 6 hours left, but since you're already here, let's go over first. Lin Feng asked, how do we go? Just follow behind me. The Thunder Punishment Sage King smiled. All right. Lin Feng nodded and then said to Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing, You two go into the Sword God's palace first and come out later. The two of them couldn't keep up with them, so they had to enter the Sword God palace first. After a while, the Thunder Punishment Saint ruler opened a spatial tunnel and entered it. Lin Feng followed closely behind, shuttling through space. After traveling through the space-time turbulence for several 100 million miles, the Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch opened up another spatial tunnel. After exiting the spatial tunnel, the Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch said calmly, "It's here." Lin Feng looked around and said in surprise, "A plane world." The Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch said, "This is a high-level plane called the Crescent Major Plane. Among all the planes, the Crescent Major Plane is the largest. Its energy is the densest, and its law energy is the clearest. It also gives birth to the most powerful cultivators. Among the 100 or so sage monarchs in the world today, 6 of them are from the Crescent Major Plane. There were only 130 sage monarchs in total, and there were tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of plane worlds. Just the high-level planes alone numbered more than 10,000. As one of the high-level planes, the Crescent Major Plane had 6 sage monarchs. It was indeed terrifying. Which 6 sage monarchs? Lin Feng asked curiously. Sage Monarch Sui Yang. The Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch said, Earth Sage Monarch, Evil Shadow Sage Monarch, Crescent Sage Monarch, Clear Sky Sage Monarch, and Tidal Sage Monarch. Hiss! Lin Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. These 6 sage monarchs included Sage Monarch Sui Yang and a top-notch veteran sage monarch, the Earth Sage Monarch. The other 4 sage monarchs were not weak either. As expected, the Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch's words confirmed Lin Feng's guess. Apart from Sage Monarch Sui Yang and the Earth Sage Monarch, the other 4 sage monarchs are all veteran sage monarchs. Although they are not as powerful as the Earth Sage Monarch, they are still not to be underestimated. The Earth Sage Monarch was able to dominate the other 4 sage monarchs mainly because of his second-rate innate spiritual treasure giant act. In terms of Sage Monarch will alone, the Earth Sage Monarch was not much stronger than the other 4 sage monarchs. As expected of the most powerful Crescent Major Plane, its overall strength could be said to be the best in the world. The entrance to the desolate Origin Land is located at the bottom of the Crescent Ocean in the Crescent Major Plane. Let's go there first. The Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch led the way. After about 15 minutes, the two entered the bottom of the Crescent Major Plane. Lin Feng exclaimed, "The Crescent Major Plane is too big." Indeed, the Crescent Major Plane was almost 1/10 the size of the Sui-Yang realm. For a planar world, this size was indeed shocking. In comparison, the Xingfeng realm was not even 1/10,000th the size of the Crescent Major Plane. It was not unreasonable for such a huge world to give birth to so many powerhouses. Lord Thunder Punishment. As soon as the Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch and Lin Feng arrived, they saw more than 100 sage monarchs. The sage monarchs greeted them respectfully. 2 of the sage monarchs flew over from the sealed entrance of the desolate Origin Land and stopped beside the Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch. These 2 were the Samsara Sage Monarch and the Space Sage Monarch. The Samsara Sage Monarch was one of the 3 veteran Sage Monarchs who were on par with the Earth Sage Monarch and the Hurricane Sage Monarch. The Space Sage Monarch was also a veteran Sage Monarch. However, he did not have a second-rate innate spiritual treasure and was slightly weaker than the 3 veteran Sage Monarchs. It seems like I'm a little late this time. The Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch nodded to the 3, then glanced at the Sage Monarchs and asked in surprise, "Where's Sui Yang?" The only veteran Sage Monarch, the Hurricane Sage Monarch, said, "Lord Sui Yang and the others are not here yet." At this moment a voice sounded, "It's only been a month. Do you miss me that much?" It was the Sui Yang Sage Monarch. Beside him were the Earth Sage Monarch, the Crescent Sage Monarch, and a few others. They were all local Sage Monarchs of the Crescent Major Plane. "We're here too." The Miao Miao Sage Monarch, the Fire Sage Monarch, and the others came together and laughed. At this moment, all the human sage monarchs except for Xingfeng and Lin Hai had arrived. Other than them, there were Chang Gongyan, Hull, Blue Maple, Kakadal, Zhang Kuei, Skyfall, Pretty Shan and King Yong. These 8 were once the top 10 human sage monarchs. Although Left Blade and Gao Yi were also among the top 10 human sage monarchs, they did not receive a slot. Moreover, Left Blade had already died. Even if he received a slot, he would not be able to come. On Linfeng's side, there were only 2 late-stage Earth Sage Monarchs, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing. The Sui-Yang Sage Monarch's gaze paused on Linfeng for a moment. Although it was only for a short moment, Linfeng could still feel the coldness in his gaze. It seems like I have to be careful of him. No matter what, I can't fall into his hand. Linfeng's heart tightened. He did not think that a Sage Monarch fruit would be enough to make the Sui-Yang Sage Monarch give up his hatred for him. He was sure that the Sui-Yang Sage Monarch would not hesitate to get rid of him if he had the chance. Fortunately, although the Sui-Yang Sage Monarch hated Linfeng, he did not dare to attack Linfeng in front of the Thunder Sage Monarch. Therefore, Linfeng was still safe for the time being. As time passed, the seal that the Sage Monarchs had put together started to tremble. Waves of powerful energy erupted from the ground and kept attacking the seal, causing the seal's power to become chaotic. The seawater started to churn as if the entire ocean was boiling. At most, the seal will be released in 2 hours. The Thunder Sage Monarch frowned. Why aren't the Sage Monarchs here yet? The Sui-Yang Sage Monarch said calmly, "It's best that they don't come." As soon as he finished speaking, ha ha ha. A loud laugh came from above. More than 100 figures rushed over. They were extremely fast and arrived in the blink of an eye. "Sorry, we are here. We have disappointed you." Linfeng looked over curiously. This was the first time he had seen the legendary Sage Monarch. Unlike the Sage Monarchs, the Sage Monarch's violent aura was very faint. There was almost no black fog on his body. Other than his scarlet eyes that did not resemble humans, the rest of them were no different from humans or monsters. If one were to cover their eyes, it would be difficult to tell if they were human Sage Monarchs or Sage Monarchs. This was very different from what Linfeng had imagined. He had thought that the Sage Monarchs would be a group of extremely violent and bloodthirsty monsters, even more terrifying than the Sage Monarch. However, when he came into contact with the Sage Monarchs, he realized that the Sage Monarchs were not much different from the Sage Monarchs. If there was a difference, perhaps it was their scarlet eyes. 150 Sage Monarchs, nearly 100 of them were human Sage Monarchs, and more than 50 of them were monster Sage Monarchs. There are more Sage Monarchs than Sage Monarchs. Linfeng noticed this. It seems that other than the 150 Sage Monarchs that came here, the Sage Monarchs should also be part of the Sage Monarch. I just don't know how many of them there are. Sage Monarch Sui-Yang's face darkened. Yuan Kuei, don't forget our agreement. During the opening of the barren origin land, the Sage Monarchs left behind in your tribe are not allowed to attack humans. The Sage Monarch called Yuan Kuei by Sage Monarch Sui-Yang smiled faintly. Don't worry. We, the Sage Monarchs, will never go back on our words. We should be the ones who should be worried. After all, humans are too untrustworthy. Who knows if you have purposely hidden a few Sage Monarchs and took the opportunity to attack us? You. Sage Monarch Sui-Yang's face was extremely ugly. However, he seemed to be very afraid of Yuan Kuei, so he did not dare to say anything too unpleasant. At this moment, Yuan Kuei's eyes fell on Linfeng. You are the new human Sage Monarch? Linfeng's heart tightened. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. That's me. Do you know that compared to Sui-Yang and Lei Fa, I want to get rid of you more? Yuan Kuei did not hide his murderous intent. If it weren't for you, Fairy Zhu and Qing Mu would not have been severely injured. My sage monarchs would not have been stopped by a mere 10 million humans. If it weren't for you, the rebirth land would be our territory now. You can't blame me because we are on different sides, Linfeng said in a low voice. Well said. Yuan Kuei laughed. Compared to sage monarch Suiyang, he was more frank and charismatic. You are doing all this because we are on different sides. Then, if I give you a second-rate innate spiritual treasure, would you be willing to join the sage monarchs? Then, wouldn't we be on the same side? For a moment, all the sage monarchs, and Coke were shocked. They all looked at Linfeng. Chapter 750. No! Before Linfeng could speak, Saint King Suiyang said angrily, Yuan Kuei, don't go overboard. Yuan Kuei said with a faint smile, overboard? I don't think I'm going overboard. But you, Suiyang, I heard that Linfeng just made a great contribution and you want to deal with him. If it were me, I would have broken ties with the humans and joined the Gu Demon tribe. He looked at Linfeng. So, Linfeng, do you want to join the Gu Demon tribe? Many Saint Kings were anxious. Linfeng, don't agree to it. When Linfeng was targeted by Saint King Suiyang, they did not say a word. Now that Yuan Kuei invited Linfeng to join the Gu Demon tribe, they were all as anxious as monkeys. They were not afraid of Linfeng's strength, but they were afraid of Linfeng's ability to refine the 9 refinement sacred armor. If Linfeng joined the Gu Demon tribe and created a fully armed Gu Demon army, then the Thunder Core's advantage would be gone and the rebirth state would be easily taken down. They would never allow that to happen. Linfeng looked at the Saint Kings with a mocking gaze. He was even more disappointed with these people. However, he still rejected Yuan Kuei's invitation. Sorry, I'm a human. It was a simple answer, but no one could find fault with it. Hearing Linfeng's answer, the Saint Kings were relieved. Yuan Kuei, on the other hand, was disappointed. Don't make a decision so quickly. You might change your mind one day. Anyway, the Gu Demon tribe's door is always open to you. If you feel bored of the human world one day, you can come to the Gu Demon tribe to play. The Thunder Punishment Saint King, who had been silent for a long time, said, It's about time, Yuan Kuei. Yuan Kuei looked at the Thunder Punishment Saint King and suddenly smiled. All right, Thunder Punishment, I'll give you some face. At the end, he winked at Linfeng. Remember what I said. Linfeng looked down and pretended not to hear. Linfeng. At this time, the Thunder Punishment Saint King sent a voice transmission to Linfeng. There's still 2 hours before the seal is broken. This king will tell you about the desolate land first. Linfeng was overjoyed. Thank you, sir. The Thunder Punishment Sage Monarch said, The time that the desolate origin lands opens is not fixed. Sometimes it's half a year, sometimes it's 8 months, and sometimes it's a year. However, it's basically maintained between half a year and a year. The entrance is right beneath our feet. Once the seal is undone, we can just go in. As for the exit, he paused for a moment. There is no exit in the desolate origin land. Linfeng was stunned. Then how do we get out? Once the time is up, a mysterious force will teleport us out. We don't have to take the initiative to find the exit. The Thunder Punishment Saint King said, The desolate origin lands are extremely large. It's countless times larger than the 7 longevity secret lands combined. Until now, this king has not been able to explore its borders. Moreover, the desolate origin lands not only have innate spiritual treasures, but also many other precious treasures. For example, the Saint King fruit, 9-fold essence water, and so on. Correspondingly, every treasure is surrounded by extremely powerful guardian beasts. These guardian beasts are born from heaven and earth. Their only purpose is to protect the treasures. They are extremely powerful. The weakest of them is comparable to a normal Saint King. The strongest ones are so strong that even this king and Suiyang Saint King do not dare to provoke them. Linfeng's heart skipped a beat. Is this the danger that the Thunder Punishment Saint King mentioned? A guardian beast that was even stronger than the Thunder Punishment Saint King and Sui Yang Saint King. Just thinking about it made his heart palpitate. Of course, the strength of the guardian beasts is closely related to the value of the treasures. The Thunder Punishment Saint King added, the stronger the guardian beasts, the more valuable the treasures are. The guardian beasts of first-grade innate spiritual treasures are comparable to this king and Sui Yang Saint King. The guardian beasts of second-grade innate spiritual treasures are comparable to the 5 titled Saint Kings, Miao Miao Saint King, and Hua Zhe Saint King. The guardian beasts of third-grade innate spiritual treasures are comparable to the top veteran Saint Kings. Other than that, there are also some treasures that are not as valuable as innate spiritual treasures. The guardian beasts of these treasures are comparable to normal or veteran Saint Kings. Hearing this, Linfeng's expression became unprecedentedly solemn. Oh right, let me remind you that innate spiritual treasures are not the most precious things in the desolate origin lands. The Thunder Punishment Saint King said, there are many treasures that are as valuable as innate spiritual treasures. For example, the Saint King fruit is between a first-grade innate spiritual treasure and a second-grade innate spiritual treasure. Other than that, there are many similar treasures. Some of them are even more valuable than first-grade innate spiritual treasures. Correspondingly, the guardian beasts of these treasures are more powerful than this king and Sui Yang Saint King. With that, the Thunder Punishment Saint King looked at Linfeng solemnly. So, when you see treasures, it's best to be rational. Don't act rashly and think about your own strength first. Thank you for the reminder, my lord. Linfeng broke out in cold sweat. If not for the Thunder Punishment Saint King's reminder, he might have become a cold corpse soon. However, you don't have to worry too much. The Thunder Punishment Saint King smiled. First-grade innate spiritual treasures, or treasures that are even more valuable than first-grade innate spiritual treasures, are extremely rare. I have entered the desolate origin lands more than 100 times and have only seen them twice. It should be difficult for you to encounter them. Even if you do, as long as you are careful and do not provoke the guardian beasts, they will usually ignore you. Linfeng nodded. I understand. All right, I have said all that needs to be said. When you enter later, be careful. Yes, my lord. Time gradually passed. The seal at the bottom of the tilted moon sea trembled more and more violently. The seawater in the tilted moon sea seemed to be boiling. Huge bubbles rose from the bottom of the sea. The water at the bottom of the sea became murky, blurring everyone's vision. Suddenly, a blinding white light erupted from the seal. The seal that was set up by more than 100 Saint Kings suddenly collapsed. Let's go. The Thunder Punishment Saint King shouted. The Thunder Punishment Saint King, Sui Yang Saint King, and Yuan Kuei rushed into the entrance of the desolate origin lands at almost the same time. The Miao Miao Saint King and the others followed closely behind. Linfeng said to Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing, you two enter the Sword God's palace first. Come out after I enter the desolate origin land. After sending Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing into the Sword God's palace, Linfeng suddenly released the Death God's will. His speed soared, and he rushed into the entrance of the desolate origin lands in the blink of an eye. After a few breaths, the huge pressure at the bottom of the sea suddenly disappeared. The scenery around Linfeng also changed dramatically. All kinds of strange plants grew quietly. There were towering ancient trees, verdant bamboos, flowers and vines, and the air was filled with a refreshing fragrance. The environment here made people feel relaxed and happy, as if it was a paradise of peach blossoms. The only strange thing was that everything in the surroundings had a soft white brilliance flowing on its surface, and even the soil on the ground was no exception. The fluctuation of the laws is so clear. Linfeng was shocked. In this place there was no need to actively cultivate. One's comprehension of the laws would naturally increase. The fusion of the laws would also quietly accelerate. This was a cultivation paradise. Living here, even if one did not cultivate, one's strength would increase rapidly. Lin Feng was not a Saint King. Therefore, the benefits he gained were greater than what the Saint Kings had imagined. In just a few breaths, his comprehension of the law of gravity had quietly increased by 0.1%. This kind of speed was simply scaring people to death. Ting Wenbing. Lin Feng immediately brought Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing out. The moment they came out, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing exclaimed in shock. Such clear fluctuations of the laws. Lin Feng chuckled. Seems like I made the right choice this time. Boss, I have a feeling. Huang Wenbing closed his eyes, looking intoxicated. I can break through to Saint King in half a year's time. He did not know why he had such a feeling, but there was a faint voice in his heart telling him that he could definitely break through to Saint King in half a year's time. Then, a trace of doubt crossed his face. But, didn't I become a Saint King by refining a Saint Godhead? Jing Ting was also puzzled. I also have this feeling, it's really strange. Hee, you don't need to feel strange. Lin Feng chuckled. There's something I haven't told you. In fact, what you refined back then was not a Saint Godhead, but the Saint King Godhead. Therefore, there will be a day when you become a Saint King. The desolate origin lands merely brought forward the time of your breakthrough. Saint King Godhead. Huang Wenbing was dumbfounded. The one I obtained in the secret land was the Saint King Godhead? Jing Ting was also surprised. Saint King Godhead, doesn't that mean? She was overjoyed. Lin Feng nodded. Your feeling is right, maybe, you can really break through to Saint King in half a year's time. As soon as he finished speaking, Huang Wenbing shouted excitedly, ha ha ha, ha. This is great, I, Huang Wenbing, can also become a Saint King. Boss won't lie to me, I can definitely become a Saint King. He was so excited that he danced with joy. Compared to Huang Wenbing, Jing Ting's reaction was much more reserved. Her face was flushed red, and there were thousands of words she wanted to say, but she did not say them. She only held Lin Feng's hand tightly, sharing this sudden joy with the person she loved. After becoming a Saint King, I'll be able to help boss, Huang Wenbing said excitedly to Lin Feng. He did not realize how much his words touched Lin Feng. A heartfelt smile appeared on Lin Feng's face as he said, Come, let's go look around, maybe we'll come across a third-rate or even second-rate innate spiritual treasure. And Huang Wenbing nodded heavily. However, just as the three of them were about to set off, a voice came from not far behind them. Go? This king wants to see where you can go. As the voice fell, a burly figure appeared in Lin Feng's line of sight. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing exclaimed, It's him! Lin Feng's face sank. Great Earth Holy King! Chapter 751. Although Lin Feng was surprised to meet the Earth Saint King again, he was not afraid. Enter the Sword God's palace in a while, Lin Feng said solemnly. He was not worried about his own safety, but he was worried that the Earth Saint King would attack Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing. With Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing's strength, they might not even be able to block a single attack from the Earth Saint King. Okay. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing nodded. In the next moment, Lin Feng sent the two of them into the Sword God's palace. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. The Earth Saint King looked at the scene indifferently and did not stop it. Obviously, he had absolute confidence in his own strength. Moreover, before he left, Saint King Sui Yang gave him a treasure. It was this treasure that boosted his confidence to an unprecedented level. Are you ready? The Earth Saint King said indifferently. If you are ready, then let's continue the unfinished battle from before. Seeing how calm the Earth Saint King was, Lin Feng immediately became cautious. This fellow clearly knew that he had a terrifying ultimate move, but he still dared to be so arrogant. This meant that there must be a trap. Could it be that someone is lying in ambush? Linfeng released the Death God's will and secretly checked the situation around him. However, he realized that there was no one around other than him and the Earth Saint King. The Earth Saint King sneered, "No need to check. I am the only one here." Linfeng's gaze landed on the Earth Saint King. "Are you really confident that you can defeat me?" "Not defeat." A cold light flashed through the Earth Saint King's eyes. "Kill. Then let's see who is stronger." Linfeng took a deep breath and released the Death God's will. The current Linfeng's control of the Death God's will had risen to another level. Every Death God's will was distributed perfectly. There was no waste at all. The Earth Saint King flipped his palm, and the giant axe that contained destructive power appeared in his hand again. Linfeng's gaze stopped on the giant axe, second-rate natural spiritual treasure. Earth collapse. The Earth Saint King instantly went all out. He did not hold back at all and released his Saint King will to his heart's content. He used his ultimate move right from the start. Linfeng was shocked. He quickly propped up the Sword God's palace and performed the fusion law technique. 6 techniques. In the blink of an eye, the fused power of laws collided with the destructive power of the giant axe. Boom! Linfeng was knocked over 100 zhang backward. More than 10 towering ancient trees were snapped in half and slowly fell to the ground. The desolate Origin Lands was an extremely special place. Everyone's strength would be heavily suppressed here. They would only be able to use a 10,000th of their strength at most. If it were outside, the battle between Linfeng and the Earth Saint ruler would be enough to affect several 100,000 planets and destroy a nebula. However, it was only a radius of a few hundred meters here. It was completely different. Pooh! Linfeng spat out a mouthful of blood, but a smile appeared on his face instead. It's much easier than last time. It was very difficult for the Earth Saint King to kill him with just his strength. This was because even the Earth Saint King's ultimate move, Earth Collapse, could only injure him slightly. Moreover, the injury was far from serious. He could recover in a single breath. However, his Death God will was limited. It was nowhere near the Earth Saint King's Saint Ruler will. As a result, Linfeng was not the Earth Saint King's opponent for the time being in a protracted battle. The longer the battle went on, the more disadvantageous it would be for Linfeng. Earth Collapse. The Earth Saint King had been guarding against Linfeng using the pseudo-spiritual treasure, so he attacked at an extremely high frequency. He attacked continuously like a storm, not giving Linfeng any time to catch his breath. He was afraid that Linfeng would use his terrifying ultimate move. 6 techniques. Linfeng blocked the Sword God's palace with all his might. The huge impact from the Sword God's palace sent him flying again. However, in the process of being sent flying, 100 weapons containing terrifying energy suddenly appeared beside Linfeng. As soon as the 100 weapons appeared, they instantly arranged themselves according to a special pattern. The surrounding space faintly trembled. Without a doubt, these 100 weapons were all pseudo-spiritual treasures that Linfeng had specially refined before coming to the barren land. He did not expect that they would really come in handy. The Earth Saint King's expression changed. "Damn it, it's this move again!" Explode. Taking advantage of the moment when the Earth Saint King relaxed, Linfeng suddenly detonated the 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures. "Do you think you can kill me with this move?" The Earth Saint King sneered. He raised his axe and slashed down. Earth Collapse. Boom, 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 boom. The violent explosion instantly flattened the ground. Everything within a radius of 1,000 feet was swallowed by this energy. The hurricane formed by the explosion even blew 1,000 feet away. Many trees and flowers were blown away. It was a spectacular sight. Gotcha! A crisp sound came from the Earth Saint King's body. The Earth Saint King looked at the chainmail on his body that was full of cracks and was extremely shocked. Even a second-rate innate spiritual treasure can't block it. The power of the explosion this time was even greater than the previous time. This was because the materials of the 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures that Lin Feng had previously refined were converted from 7th grade and 8th grade materials. Now, the 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures were converted from 9th grade materials. There was a natural difference between the two, so naturally there was a difference in power. Indeed, there's a problem. Lin Feng immediately understood. Of course, he knew that it was almost impossible to kill the Earth Saint King by detonating the 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures. However, he still did it because he wanted to test the Earth Saint King and see why he was so confident. Now, he understood that the Earth Saint King was relying on that chainmail. A second-rate innate spiritual treasure chainmail. That old man Sui Yang is so generous. Lin Feng felt a chill in his heart. In order to get rid of me, he was actually willing to give a second-rate innate spiritual treasure to the Earth Saint King. Defense-type innate spiritual treasures were extremely rare. It was hard to find 1 in 10 innate spiritual treasures, let alone a second-rate innate spiritual treasure chainmail. Unfortunately, the Earth Saint King was unable to unleash the true power of this second-rate innate spiritual treasure chainmail. Therefore, such a priceless treasure was destroyed by Lin Feng's explosion of the pseudo-spiritual treasures. The Earth Saint King was furious. He roared and charged toward Lin Feng. Just in time. Lin Feng did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. 200 pseudo-spiritual treasures suddenly appeared beside him. Seeing this, the Earth Saint King's eyelids suddenly twitched. He was scared out of his wits. Almost without any hesitation, the Earth Saint King suddenly stopped his charge and turned to run. The power of 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures was enough to cause him serious injuries. 200 pseudo-spiritual treasures were enough to kill him instantly. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Damn it, didn't he already use this move just now? Is there no limit to this move? The cruel reality was the complete opposite of what he had imagined. Explode. Lin Feng would not let go of such a good opportunity. Since the Earth Saint King dared to come to kill him, he had to be prepared to be killed by him. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by a scream, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. The Earth Saint King's body was also mercilessly swallowed up. The second-rate innate spiritual treasure chainmail shattered. The Earth Saint King's strong physical body was also mercilessly destroyed. The Saint King's demigod was exposed in mid-air. Trying to run? Lin Feng's body flashed. He grabbed the Saint King's demigod with one hand and instantly gathered the Death God's demigod. Ah! The Saint Monarch Godhead let out another miserable shriek as the last sliver of life force within it dissipated. Looking at the Saint Monarch Godhead lying quietly in his hand, Lin Feng could feel the surging power contained within it, and a smile appeared on his face. Since I destroyed 300 pseudo-spiritual artifacts, this Saint Monarch Godhead will be my compensation. If that's the case, I won't lose out. The value of a single Saint Monarch Godhead was not something 300 pseudo-spiritual artifacts could compare to. With this Saint Monarch Godhead, he could create another Saint Monarch. That's right, there's also that giant axe. Lin Feng's eyes lit up, and he immediately released his spiritual force to search around. Suddenly, he descended back to the ground, stuck one hand into the soil, and grabbed an axe. Second-rate natural spirit treasure, Sky Splitter Axe. A short piece of information surged into Lin Feng's mind. Holding the Heaven Splitter Axe in one hand and the Saint Monarch Godhead in the other, Lin Feng couldn't help laughing. This trip to the desolate Origin Land was worth it. Whether it was the second-rate natural spirit treasure or the Saint Monarch Godhead, they were both priceless treasures. If he could obtain any one of them, Lin Feng's trip would not have been in vain. Suddenly, Lin Feng raised his head and put away the Saint Monarch Godhead and Heaven Splitter Axe into the one space, and then slowly stretched out his right hand. Drip! Drip! Drops of bright red blood dripped onto his hand, and then along his hand, dripped to the ground. Densely packed blood droplets fell from the sky like a fine drizzle, but all the raindrops had turned into blood droplet. A vision from the heavens, a saint monarch has fallen. Linfeng's face changed. In the next moment, he released the death god's will, pushed his speed to the limit, and left this place. However, even though he was hundreds of miles away, the sky was still dripping with blood. He didn't dare to delay here, and left this place as quickly as possible to avoid being discovered that he had killed an Earth Saint monarch. At this stage, he still wanted to keep a low profile and hide for as long as possible. Otherwise, all kinds of trouble would follow. At the same time, all the Saint Kings and Mastiff Kings raised their heads. A vision from the heavens, a saint monarch has fallen. The entire desolate Origin land was covered in blood rain. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was suffocating and oppressive. The sky was dyed red by the blood rain, and it became a red world. A saint monarch has fallen, haha. Yuan Kuei's lips curled into a smile. Interesting. Sui Yang Saint King smiled faintly. A puny new saint monarch dares to fight with me. He deserves to die. I hope Linfeng is fine. Thunder Punishment Saint King frowned, sighed, and muttered softly. Meow Meow Saint King, Fire Lake Saint King, and many other Saint Kings shook their heads. What a pity. If he didn't go against Sui Yang Saint King, he might have a bright future. Chapter 752. After leaving the battlefield, Lin Feng lost his sense of direction. He didn't know where to go. He was unfamiliar with the barren source, so he chose a random direction. It would be best if he could find treasures, but he would not be disappointed if he could not. He would just let nature take its course. After bringing Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing out of the Sword God's palace, the three of them walked through the forest aimlessly. Boss, what's that on your shoulder? Huang Wenbing stared at Linfeng's right shoulder. What? Linfeng was stunned and looked at his right shoulder. After seeing what it looked like, Linfeng said casually, Oh, nothing. When I was fighting with the Earth Saint King, I broke a dozen ancient trees. This should be a piece of wood. I accidentally stuck it on my clothes. As he spoke, he reached out and picked up the piece of wood on his shoulder. Suddenly, he was stunned. This is... He picked up the piece of wood and looked at it carefully. He frowned slightly. Willpower. Jing Ting asked curiously, What's wrong, Linfeng? Linfeng waved his hand and looked serious. This piece of wood is not simple. He closed his eyes and sensed it carefully. Waves of willpower rushed towards him. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and said in shock, This piece of wood contains the power of will. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing looked at each other. Huang Wenbing said blankly, I don't understand. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Anyway, you just need to know that this is great news. Linfeng did not explain in detail. He felt the surging willpower from the piece of wood. He could not calm down for a long time. This piece of wood is one level higher than a pseudo-spiritual treasure material. A pseudo-spiritual treasure material only contained a trace of willpower, but this piece of wood contained willpower all over. It was as if it was a physical object formed by willpower. Linfeng had been thinking for a long time whether there was a material higher than a pseudo-spiritual treasure material in the world. Today, he finally found it. I searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Linfeng was both shocked and excited. Such a material has a very high chance of nurturing a connate numinous treasure. Linfeng didn't know whether it would work or not, but he could give it a try. However, this piece of wood is too small. It's completely insufficient to nurture a connate numinous treasure. Linfeng muttered to himself as he looked at the towering ancient tree. I wonder if other ancient trees will work. He punched out and instantly broke an ancient tree in front of him. Boom! The ancient tree broke and slowly fell to the side. Linfeng immediately closed his eyes and carefully sensed. Moments later. It really works. He opened his eyes and was pleasantly surprised. The trunk of the ancient tree that he had broken still contained an enormous amount of willpower. After putting the ancient tree into Space One, Linfeng looked around and chose a smaller ancient tree to test. He found that although the smaller ancient tree also contained an enormous amount of willpower, it wasn't as big as the previous ancient tree. It was like a cup that wasn't filled with water. It still needed a certain amount of time to accumulate all the willpower. After that, Linfeng experimented a few more times and finally found a pattern. Only ancient trees with a diameter of more than 1 meter could reach the perfect level. Every part of the trunk was perfectly integrated with the power of will, while the branches and leaves were far from perfect. As for ancient trees with a diameter of less than 1 meter, the difference was even greater. The smaller the diameter, the less power of will it contained. A small sapling as thick as a thumb only contained a sliver of willpower, which was no different from a pseudo-spiritual treasure material. This new discovery made Linfeng even more excited. The branch I obtained in the Thunder Mist Sea that was a pseudo-spiritual treasure material is very likely a branch from one of these ancient trees in the barren spring land. Linfeng made a bold guess. Boss, what's wrong? Huang Wenbing was puzzled. Isn't it just some trees? You don't have to be so excited, do you? Jing Ting also looked at Linfeng in confusion. Linfeng smiled. In your eyes, these are just some trees. But in my eyes, they are pseudo-spiritual treasures with infinite power and even primordial spiritual treasures. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were both shocked and felt that it was incredible. I hope my guess is right. Linfeng looked around. In this way, you won't have to worry about not having primordial spiritual treasures to use in the future. Boss, is this true? Huang Wenbing looked even more excited than Linfeng. Can you really refine these trees into primordial spiritual treasures? His voice was trembling. Linfeng said, I'm not 100% sure, but there should be a great chance. After that, he said to Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing, wait for me. I'll try. If it works, then we'll have something to do. Leaving Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing to cultivate, Linfeng flashed into the Sword God's palace and entered Space One from there. He randomly picked a sword from the pile of pseudo-spiritual treasures and brandished it a few times. Then, he quickly waved his right hand, and the sharp long sword drew dozens of beautiful arcs. When he put away the sword, the ancient tree that he had put into Space One had already been stripped of its branches and leaves, leaving only a huge trunk. Success or failure depends on this. Linfeng took a breath and struck out a fusion of the law of law and the law of gravity. He threw the trunk of the ancient tree into the fusion of the law of law. The law of gravity circled around the fusion of the law of law, releasing traces of power and barely merging into it. After that, Linfeng cut off the trunk of a small tree and did the same thing, allowing it to slowly grow in an environment simulated by the fusion of the law of law and gravity. Time acceleration. Under the enhancement of the Death God's will, the effect of time acceleration was fully displayed. After an unknown period of time, the trunk of the small tree slowly transformed into a thin sword. Traces of pressure were emitted from the thin sword. When the power of law dissipated, the thin sword was completely formed. Pseudo-spiritual treasure. Linfeng smiled faintly. Just as I guessed. Reaching out to grab the thin sword, Linfeng received a message in his mind. Moonlight sword, pseudo-spiritual treasure, suitable for light attribute cultivators. Linfeng was not surprised that the trunk of the small tree had been refined into a pseudo-spiritual treasure, nor was he excited. His eyes were fixed on the trunk of the ancient tree that was still slowly changing in midair. This was what he really cared about. Time passed quietly. 100 years passed in Space One in the blink of an eye. The shape of the trunk of the ancient tree had changed, and the power of will contained in it gradually turned into a destructive power. A trace of power leaked out, causing people's hearts to palpitate. Lin Feng, who was sitting cross-legged, stared at the trunk of the ancient tree, motionless. He was covered in a thick layer of dust, but he didn't care at all. His eyes never moved and his body never moved. He was like a lifelike humanoid statue. 200 years later in Space One, the trunk of the ancient tree had turned into a giant hammer. The destructive power it emitted had reached its limit and began to tremble violently. Boom! With a deafening roar, the power of the fusion law and the gravity law was dispersed by the power contained in the giant hammer. Without the restraint of the fusion law and the gravity law, the giant hammer seemed to be flying. Lin Feng reacted quickly. He immediately released the death god's will to firmly suppress the giant hammer and grabbed it with one hand. At that moment, a message poured into Lin Feng's mind. Giant Spirit Divine Hammer, a top third-rate acquired spiritual treasure. Acquired spiritual treasure? Lin Feng frowned. This was different from what he had imagined. What's an acquired spiritual treasure? Why isn't it a connate spiritual treasure? He released the death god's will and cast the sixfold art through the giant spirit divine hammer. In an instant, the sky fell and the earth cracked as a terrifying power spread. After testing the power of the giant spirit divine hammer, Lin Feng thought to himself, "It's a little weaker than the sky regicide, but it's definitely stronger than most third-rate connate spiritual treasures." The sky regicide was a second-rate connate spiritual treasure. The giant spirit divine hammer's power was only a little weaker than the sky regicide. Even if it wasn't a second-rate connate spiritual treasure, it wasn't inferior to any third-rate connate spiritual treasure. A top third-rate acquired spiritual treasure. Lin Feng vaguely understood something. It should be equivalent to a top third-rate connate spiritual treasure. The difference between the two was probably the name. As for why the giant spirit divine hammer was called an acquired spiritual treasure, Lin Feng pondered for a moment and understood. Connate spiritual treasures are born after countless years of nurturing by the heavens and earth, so they're connate. Acquired spiritual treasures are refined by me. Although I simulated the environment of the heavens and earth, it's still different from the real heavens and earth, so they're considered acquired spiritual treasures. However, connate spiritual treasures and acquired spiritual treasures are divided into first-rate, second-rate, and third-rate. Connate spiritual treasures and acquired spiritual treasures of the same level have equal power, so there's no difference in strength. This point, the giant spirit divine hammer's power has been personally proven. After understanding the situation of connate spiritual treasures and acquired spiritual treasures, Lin Feng couldn't help but laugh heartily. Acquired spiritual treasure, I didn't expect that I, Lin Feng, would actually refine an acquired spiritual treasure. He was definitely the first weapon refiner in the world to refine an acquired spiritual treasure. His weapon refining technique was unique. Before this, no one would have dared to believe that spiritual treasures could be artificially refined. Moreover, the power of artificially refined acquired spiritual treasures was in no way inferior to connate spiritual treasures of the same level. The most legendary weapon refiner in history, he was fully deserving of the title. Most importantly, his status would definitely rise to an unparalleled level because of this. After the joy, Lin Feng calmed down and began to plan how to collect the ancient trees. In the eyes of others, the ancient trees were worthless, but in Lin Feng's eyes, they were perfect embryos. After some polishing and sculpting, they would become acquired spiritual treasures with infinite power. Although the time required to refine an acquired spiritual treasure was more than 1,000 times longer than refining a pseudo-spiritual treasure, an acquired spiritual treasure was still an acquired spiritual treasure. No matter how many pseudo-spiritual treasures there were, they couldn't be compared to an acquired spiritual treasure. If I can refine a second-rate or even first-rate acquired spiritual treasure, then even if the time spent is 10 times or 100 times longer, it's still worth it. Lin Feng's eyes flickered and his smile became even more brilliant. Chapter 753. When Lin Feng returned to the desolate land, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were still cultivating. Damn, they've improved so much in just one day. Sensing Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing's auras, Lin Feng couldn't help but be shocked. Both Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing's auras had become much stronger. If they were only ordinary late-stage Earth Stage 9 experts a day ago, then they were now experts on par with Chang Gongyan. The desolate land had been of great help to them. Their speed of improvement had probably far surpassed Chang Gongyan and Koch's. Boss! Huang Wenbing woke up from his cultivation and hurriedly stood up. How was it? His voice was a bit nervous. Jing Ting also opened her eyes, her beautiful eyes blinking slightly. Lin Feng smiled. Success. Success? Huang Wenbing was stunned for a moment, then said with ecstasy, Success. Lin Feng nodded with certainty. That's right, success. Ha ha ha. Ha. That's great. Huang Wenbing was so excited that he danced. This way, we won't have to worry about not having a natural spiritual treasure. No, it's not a natural spiritual treasure. Lin Feng interrupted Huang Wenbing's excitement and corrected him. It's an acquired spiritual treasure. Huang Wenbing fell from the clouds and almost choked to death. What acquired spiritual treasure? He only knew about natural spiritual treasures and had never heard of acquired spiritual treasures. Thus, when he heard Lin Feng's words, his heart tightened and he became nervous again. Lin Feng didn't keep him in suspense. He chuckled and said, Acquired spiritual treasures are about the same as natural spiritual treasures. The only difference is the name. Huang Wenbing immediately let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Boss, do you know that you can easily scare people to death like this? Lin Feng shrugged. You can only blame yourself for being too cowardly. He pursed his lips at Jing Ting. Look, Ting wasn't scared at all. How can I compare to sister-in-law? Huang Wenbing rolled his eyes. You know that I'm very cowardly. All right, it's my fault this time. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. How is it? After a day of cultivation, is the effect okay? At the mention of this, Huang Wenbing became excited again. It's not just okay. It's very good. Boss, do you believe me when I say that my current strength is no weaker than Big Brother Longbow's? It won't be long before none of the so-called top 10 human experts will be my mat. I know even if you don't tell me. How did you know? Wouldn't I know if I directly sense your auras? All right, then pretend I didn't say anything, Huang Wenbing said gloomily. After chatting for a while, Lin Feng said to the two of them, I'm going to collect some ancient trees in the surroundings. You two can cultivate here for the time being. When you break through to Saint King Realm, if there's still time, we'll go look for treasures in the desolate Origin Land. This place was the periphery of the desolate Origin Land. There were no saint beasts guarding it, and it was difficult to encounter other saint kings, mastiffs, and human experts. It was safe. Huang Wenbing chuckled. Boss, you have to collect more ancient trees. The acquired spiritual treasures we need in the future will all depend on you. You're not shy at all. Lin Feng smiled. Don't worry, you won't miss out on the acquired spiritual treasures. Jing Ting said with concern, Lin Feng, be careful. Lin Feng stopped smiling and nodded seriously. I'll be careful. A moment later, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing sat cross-legged again and closed their eyes to cultivate. They were racing against time to improve their strength as quickly as possible and strive to break through to Saint King Realm in the shortest time possible. Lin Feng, on the other hand, left this place and flew into the air to look for ancient trees. 300 feet away, Lin Feng smashed the bottom of an ancient tree with a punch. As the ancient tree fell to the ground, he put it into space one. The next moment, his figure appeared in front of an ancient tree and kicked it. Pa, the ancient tree was broken. The bottom of the tree was shattered, and the part from the ground above fell to the ground. The second one. Lin Feng put it into space one. With a smile on his face, he slowly flew up and searched the primeval forest. The desolate origin had existed since the birth of the world. Its history was even longer than that of humans. Moreover, this place only opened once every 10 billion years. Very few people set foot here, so the various plants were rarely damaged. It was just that the plants here grew terrifyingly slowly. It was difficult to grow much in 100 million years. A thumb-sized sapling might have existed hundreds of millions or even billions of years ago. An ancient tree with a diameter of more than 1 meter would take hundreds of billions or even trillions of years to grow to such a level. Therefore, there weren't many ancient trees that met the standard of more than 1 meter in diameter. Only one ancient tree with a diameter of more than 1 meter could be born out of hundreds of trees. What Lin Feng needed to do was to carefully examine the ancient trees, find the ones that met the standard, and then put them into space one. It was a simple and effortless job, but it was precisely because it was so simple and effortless that it became even more boring and boring. While Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were cultivating hard, Lin Feng turned into a lumberjack and silently collected ancient trees. More and more ancient trees with a diameter of more than 1 meter collapsed from Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing and disappeared from the desolate origin. Ancient trees that had grown for hundreds of billions or even trillions of years were piled up in Space One. The enormous willpower contained in those ancient trees also filled Space One with a frightening aura. 10 days later. The 300,000th tree. Lin Feng wiped the sweat off his forehead and continued his boring work. While everyone else was searching for treasures or working hard on their cultivation, Lin Feng was silently collecting ancient trees. Although he had caused quite a commotion, there was no one nearby. Thus, he did not have to worry about others noticing him. A month later. The 1,000,000th tree. Lin Feng stopped to rest for a moment. Each ancient tree was more than 1 meter in diameter. When 100,000 ancient trees were piled up, they formed an extremely majestic mountain that was more than 5,000 meters high. It was extremely spectacular. Now I've become the most professional lumberjack in the world. Lin Feng smiled self-deprecatingly. After a short rest, he flew into the air again and looked for the next ancient tree that met the standard. In his eyes, these were acquired spiritual treasures with boundless power. Therefore, he did not let go of any ancient trees that met the requirements that he found. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. In those 2 months, Lin Feng flew over 100 kilometers and collected almost all the ancient trees that were more than 1 meter in diameter into Space One. The number of ancient trees in Space One had reached an astonishing 350,000. 350,000 ancient trees were equal to 350,000 acquired spiritual treasures. That was definitely an appalling number. It should be known that since ancient times, less than 100 acquired spiritual treasures had been born in the barren source. Most of the Saint Kings were still empty-handed. However, Lin Feng had 350,000 acquired spiritual treasures, which would definitely scare a bunch of Saint Kings to death. However, refining acquired spiritual treasures took a very long time. Even with the time acceleration in Space One, it still took a day in the outside world. Therefore, it would take Lin Feng about 1,000 years to refine all 350,000 ancient trees into acquired spiritual treasures. For Lin Feng, this was still an unimaginably long period of time. After all, Lin Feng was only 50 years old. Not to mention Saint Kings, he was not even a fraction of those Supreme Masters' age. On this day, Lin Feng flew to the edge of a valley. Before he could look for the ancient trees, he was shocked by the scene in the valley. In the valley, ancient trees more than 1 meter in diameter rose from the ground. They were densely intertwined with each other. Waves of unusually strong willpower spread out layer by layer like a breeze. The closer to the center of the valley, the longer the diameter of the ancient trees became. At the very center, a giant ancient tree with a diameter of 10 meters grew quietly like a sleeping old man. Around this ancient tree were more than 10 ancient trees with a diameter of 3 to 5 meters. They surrounded it as if they were guarding the ancient tree in the center. So big! Lin Feng exclaimed. Although he was young, he had been to many places. However, this was the first time he had seen such a huge ancient tree. He even suspected that the ancient tree in the center of the valley had become a spirit. The trunk of an ancient tree with a diameter of more than 1 meter could be refined into a third-rate acquired spiritual treasure. Then, could an ancient tree with a diameter of 3 to 5 meters be refined into a second-rate acquired spiritual treasure? Could the giant tree with a diameter of more than 10 meters in the center of the valley be refined into a legendary first-rate acquired spiritual treasure? Lin Feng did not know if his guess was correct, but no matter what, he would not give up on these ancient trees. Get them! Lin Feng made a decision in an instant. Without hesitation, he immediately flew from the edge of the valley to the center of the valley. He stopped about 300 feet away from the center of the valley. Using this as a base, he began to collect the ancient trees in the center of the valley. Although the ancient trees outside were not as big as the ones in the center of the valley and the circle of ancient trees, they were still bigger than ordinary ancient trees. Lin Feng did not want to waste them. It took about a day for Lin Feng to collect all the ancient trees in the circle into Space One. In the entire valley, apart from the outermost ancient trees, only the dozen or so ancient trees in the center of the valley and the one in the center of the circle remained untouched. The rest of the area had been turned into an empty space, which had been destroyed by Lin Feng's vicious hands. Looking at his masterpiece, Lin Feng nodded with satisfaction. Finally, he looked at the center of the valley. No matter how big the tree is, it can't stop the footsteps of a professional lumberjack. Lin Feng smiled faintly. His footsteps paused for a moment, then he walked toward the center of the valley. His steps were not fast, but each step was very firm, as if he was walking toward a beautiful future. Chapter 754. Inside the Valley. Lin Feng had just advanced 100 feet when he suddenly stopped. Guardian Sacred Beast? He instantly became alert. Among the dozen or so huge ancient trees, under the dense leaves, was a pair of glowing green eyes, staring at Lin Feng. Although the surrounding ancient trees had been kept by Lin Feng into the first space, the dozen or so ancient trees in the center of the valley had not been touched by Lin Feng yet. These ancient trees were abnormally huge, and their dense leaves blocked out the light from the outside world. If one did not look carefully, it would be difficult to find the situation inside. Lin Feng frowned. Why is there a guardian sacred beast here? After a careful examination, he was surprised to find that there seemed to be something wrapped in the branches and leaves of the ancient tree in the center with a diameter of more than 10 meters. The owner of the pair of dark green eyes was there to protect that thing. Treasure! Lin Feng was a little interested. Lin Feng released his spiritual power to investigate, and his interest waned. It turned out that it was a third-rate innate spiritual treasure. In that case, the strength of this guardian sacred beast should not exceed the strength of a veteran Saint King. Unlike Saint Kings and Mastiff Kings, although the guardian sacred beast was powerful, it did not have the Saint King personality or Mastiff personality. Their strength and life came from the unique laws of the desolate origin land. Once out of the desolate origin land, these guardian sacred beasts would lose all their strength and die immediately. At this moment, the guardian sacred beast beside the ancient tree was watching Lin Feng cautiously. Lin Feng was sure that once he got close, the guardian sacred beast would launch a fierce attack at him. The strength of this guardian sacred beast is much weaker than an Earth Saint King. The power of 100 pseudo-spiritual treasures should be able to kill it instantly. Lin Feng thought to himself. However, it's better not to kill it. The guardian sacred beast lived in the desolate origin land all year round, so it definitely knew the situation of the desolate origin land better than anyone else. It would be best if he could let the guardian sacred beast lead the way to find more ancient trees. Lin Feng tried to make his smile appear gentler as he greeted the guardian beast with a friendly expression. Hi. It would have been better if he hadn't opened his mouth. The moment he did, the guardian beast seemed to have been provoked and pounced out from the ancient tree. Roar! The guardian beast pounced out of the ancient tree, its figure completely exposed to Lin Feng's line of sight. It was a wolf. No, it should be a three-eyed wolf. In the middle of its green eyes, there was a vertical eye near its forehead. Its body was as large as a truck, and the force it used to pounce over was also extremely powerful. Lin Feng dodged and avoided the three-eyed great wolf's attack. When the great wolf's limbs landed on the ground, it left behind a few deep claw marks and stirred up a cloud of dust. Don't get agitated. As Lin Feng dodged, he attempted to communicate with it. I'm not here to snatch a third-rate connate numinous treasure. Unexpectedly, the three-eyed great wolf turned a deaf ear and still pounced toward Lin Feng fiercely. It opened its bloody mouth, and its sharp teeth flashed with a cold light. If he was bitten, Lin Feng would lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. Damn, it's still coming. Lin Feng was shocked. He hurriedly released the Grim Reaper's will, pushed his speed to the limit, and quickly counterattacked. Six-fold technique. The fusion power of laws successfully hit the three-eyed great wolf, but at the same time, Lin Feng was also sent flying by the terrifying impact of the three-eyed great wolf. Fortunately, Lin Feng propped up the Sword God Palace in advance and dissipated most of the impact, so he didn't suffer any injuries. On the other hand, the three-eyed great wolf's bloody mouth was actually smashed askew by the fusion power of laws. A tooth mixed with blood flowed out of its mouth, and it let out an angry and miserable howl. Awoo, awoo, awoo! Sigh, I already said that you are no match for me, but you just had to make a move. Lin Feng shook his head. Why bother? The three-eyed great wolf's eyes suddenly became resentful. Did this human really say those words? Why can't I remember? Seeing the change in its eyes, Lin Feng said in surprise, So you can understand me. The three-eyed great wolf's eyes were unfriendly, and it didn't say a word. Okay, don't put on that look. It's quite scary. Although he said that, Lin Feng didn't look scared at all. I just said that I'm not here to snatch that third-rate innate spiritual treasure. At the mention of the third-class primordial spiritual treasure, the three-eyed giant wolf's eyes instantly widened. It opened its huge bloody mouth and was about to howl again. However, Lin Feng glared at it and said, All right, stop howling. Your mouth is already crooked. Why are you still howling? The three-eyed great wolf held its breath. Lin Feng continued, It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. I'm here for these ancient trees. He pointed at the dozen ancient trees in the middle of the valley, as well as the huge ancient tree with a diameter of more than 10 meters in the center. See, these ancient trees are my target. So, don't blow your beard and glare at me. I'm not interested in the third-rate innate spiritual treasure you are guarding. Do you understand? The three-eyed great wolf almost choked to death. Blow my beard and glare? How can I have a beard? At most, I'll just glare. I've said what I need to say. I'm going to collect those ancient trees now. If you don't believe me, you can follow me and see. Lin Feng glanced at it. But if you dare to attack me again, don't blame me for cutting off your wolf skin and using it as a cushion. Hearing that, the three-eyed great wolf was shocked. Its anus, no, the skin all over its body tightened and it couldn't help but shiver. Lin Feng ignored the three-eyed great wolf. Instead, he walked slowly to the dozen or so ancient trees and pushed toward the center of the valley. A look of struggle flashed in the three-eyed great wolf's eyes. It wanted to move but didn't dare to. It was very hesitant. Boom! 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 Under its incredulous gaze, Lin Feng really kicked down more than a dozen ancient trees and put them into space number 1 by 1. In this way, only the giant tree with a diameter of more than 10 meters in the center of the valley was left. Hey! Lin Feng pouted at the three-eyed great wolf. You take away that third-rate innate spiritual treasure. I'm going to take this ancient tree. Hearing that, the three-eyed great wolf quickly flew to the ancient tree. But when it approached Lin Feng, it slowed down and became more vigilant. It went around Lin Feng and flew to the third-rate innate spiritual treasure at the top of the tree. Opening its mouth and holding the third-rate innate spiritual treasure, the three-eyed great wolf immediately increased its speed to the maximum. It flew hundreds of feet away before it let out a long sigh of relief. However, when it let go, the third-rate innate spiritual treasure in its mouth fell to the ground. It was almost scared to death. Afraid that Lin Feng would come to snatch it at this critical moment, it turned its head without hesitation and bared its teeth. It howled in Lin Feng's direction, "Awu! Awu! Ugh!" However, its howl was only halfway through when it abruptly stopped, because it turned its head and found that Lin Feng didn't even look at it. Instead, he was studying how to break the ancient tree. He didn't seem to be interested in the third-rate innate spiritual treasure that it cared so much about. It turned out that it had been acting for a long time, but in the end it was just wishful thinking. Hearing its strange howl, Lin Feng turned his head in confusion. "What are you doing?" The three-eyed great wolf stared at Lin Feng in a daze. It didn't even notice that the third-rate innate spiritual treasure it cared most about had fallen to the ground. Silly wolf! Lin Feng was speechless. He turned his head and didn't bother to talk to the three-eyed great wolf anymore. He continued studying and finally found the right spot. This is it. Lin Feng marked a spot on the giant ancient tree that had a diameter of more than 10 meters. Then, he clenched his right hand into a fist, took a deep breath, and punched at the spot he had marked. Boom! Crack! The cross-section with the mark as the point was smashed into pieces by Lin Feng's punch. The gigantic ancient tree, which was more than 200 meters tall, fell heavily to the ground with a tremendous force. Lin Feng quickly put the tree into space number 1 and let out a sigh of relief. Got it! A charming smile appeared on his face. The trip was complete. Wiping his sweat, Lin Feng turned his head and looked at the three-eyed great wolf. The three-eyed great wolf was nervous and vigilant against Lin Feng. It put on a ferocious look and let out low growls from time to time, trying to scare Lin Feng away. "We'll meet again if fate wills it," Lin Feng said with a smile. "I'm leaving. Don't miss me and don't miss me. We're not fated. Even if we are, it's an ill-fated fate." The three-eyed great wolf sobbed in its heart. Only a ghost would miss you. It couldn't wait for Lin Feng to leave. Otherwise, its little heart would be scared to death sooner or later. Under its vigilant gaze, Lin Feng finally left with a satisfied smile on his face. He left happily. The three-eyed great wolf let out a long sigh and lay on the ground. It murmured happily, "That human devil is finally gone." It looked at the intact third-rate connate spiritual treasure under its paw and put on a human-like smile. Fortunately, the third-rate connate spiritual treasure that I'm guarding wasn't taken away. While talking, it became complacent. "Don't you know who the guardian of this third-rate connate spiritual treasure is? That's the greatest wolf king in the area, the great three-eyed great wolf." As soon as it finished speaking, a voice came into its ears. You can talk." This familiar voice immediately scared the three-eyed giant wolf to the point that it crawled up. Its hair stood on end, and its heart thumped violently. Its huge wolf body retreated, and it bared its teeth in the direction of the voice. It was still that human. He hadn't left yet. Lin Feng slowly descended from the sky and landed on the spot where the three-eyed great wolf had been lying. After landing, he said with a smile, "I thought you were mute. No, I thought you couldn't speak human language. Now that you can speak human language, it's even better. We can communicate. Only a ghost wants to communicate with you. The three-eyed great wolf cursed in its heart, but it kept its mouth shut. Isn't this your third-rate connate spiritual treasure? You don't want it any more? Lin Feng looked at the third-rate connate spiritual treasure with cyan halos on the ground. The three-eyed great wolf was stunned. Its eyes paused on the third-rate connate spiritual treasure, then moved to Lin Feng and back to the third-rate connate spiritual treasure. Chapter 755. The wolf said fiercely, "Give it back to me." "Fine, don't be so fierce." Lin Feng shrugged, picked up the third-rate innate spiritual treasure, and threw it to the wolf. The wolf leaped into the air, held the third-rate innate spiritual treasure in its mouth, and landed on the ground, looking at Lin Feng warily. Lin Feng said, "Don't look at me like that, I didn't steal your third-rate innate spiritual treasure." The wolf's eyes remained unchanged, guarding against Lin Feng as if he were a thief, afraid that Lin Feng would steal the treasure from its mouth. "Forget it, I don't want to beat around the bush with you," Lin Feng said. "I have a deal to discuss with you. I wonder if you're interested?" Hearing this, the wolf shook its head decisively, showing no interest at all. "All right, I shouldn't have asked this question." Lin Feng directly skipped this part and said, "You've lived in the desolate land for so long, you should be familiar with this area, right?" The wolf nodded and then shook its head. Lin Feng was speechless. "Can't you just answer me directly?" The three-eyed wolf shook its head, not giving Lin Feng any face at all. "I'm going to get some more ancient trees, but I'm not familiar with the desolate land. Do you know where I can find such ancient trees?" Lin Feng said, "In theory, there must be treasures around such ancient trees. If it's an innate spiritual treasure, it'll be yours, and if it's something else, it'll be mine. How about it?" It had to be said that Lin Feng's proposal was quite tempting. The wolf hesitated for a moment and then shook its head and refused. "Why?" Lin Feng was puzzled. This deal was very beneficial to both the three-eyed wolf and Lin Feng. Lin Feng did not believe that the three-eyed wolf was not interested in other primordial spiritual treasures. After a moment of silence, the wolf put the third-rate innate spiritual treasure aside and said, "I don't believe you." "You don't believe me?" Lin Feng frowned. "Connate spiritual treasures are extremely attractive to everyone. I don't believe that you can resist the charm of a connate spiritual treasure." The three-eyed wolf stared at Lin Feng. "Don't think that you can fool me with those useless trees. Let me tell you, this Wolf King is not someone who can be fooled." Lin Feng heaved a sigh of relief. "So that's what you're worried about?" He pursed his lips and said, "To be honest, connate numinous treasures are truly not attractive to me. I don't believe it." "Why not? According to what you said, why did I return the third-rate connate spirit treasure to you?" "Do you think I don't understand? You humans are very cunning. You must be thinking of using a long line to catch a big fish. That's why you deliberately returned that third-rate innate spiritual treasure to me." The three-eyed wolf said, "You can't fool me." Lin Feng was completely defeated by this stupid wolf. There was no other way. Now that things had come to this, he could only prove himself. "Don't doubt me. I have a way to prove myself." Lin Feng said, "Do you know why I'm collecting these ancient trees everywhere?" The three-eyed wolf was also puzzled. It had noticed Lin Feng a long time ago. It could not understand why Lin Feng was collecting those useless trees. Lin Feng smiled faintly. "There are no outsiders here, so I can tell you. Actually, I'm collecting these ancient trees to refine connate spiritual treasures." "Connate spiritual treasures?" The three-eyed wolf looked at Lin Feng in confusion, indicating that it had never heard of it. Spiritual treasures that are born naturally are connate spiritual treasures. Similarly, spiritual treasures that are refined by humans are connate spiritual treasures. Lin Feng had to give the three-eyed wolf some knowledge about spiritual treasures. Connate spiritual treasures and connate spiritual treasures of the same grade are about the same in power. These ancient trees are materials for refining connate spiritual treasures, and I, Lin Feng, am the only legendary craftsman in the world who can refine connate spiritual treasures. At the end, Lin Feng could not help but feel a little proud. The three-eyed wolf was shocked. You can refine connate spiritual treasures? Lin Feng did not know whether to laugh or cry. I told you, it's not connate spiritual treasures. It's connate spiritual treasures. Isn't it the same? The three-eyed wolf did not care. It rolled its eyes. But, how do I know if you're lying to me? It's very simple. Take a look at this weapon first. Lin Feng took out the gigantic spirit hammer from Space One and threw it to the three-eyed wolf. Take a good look. The three-eyed wolf pressed the gigantic spirit hammer to the ground with its paw and observed it carefully. It was surprised. It's really a connate spiritual treasure. But then it shook its head. No, it's not a connate spiritual treasure, but its power is no weaker than a connate spiritual treasure. In its perception, the destructive power contained in the gigantic spirit hammer was even greater and more terrifying than that of the third-rate connate spiritual treasure it was guarding. Moreover, it had smelled a trace of the smell of withered wood from the gigantic divine spirit hammer. Withered wood was a type of ancient tree that was unique to the desolate origin, and there were countless of them within an area of 5,000 kilometers. It had smelled the smell of withered wood countless times, so it naturally wouldn't make a mistake. This is the top third-rate connate spiritual treasure I refined. Lin Feng said. How is it? Compared to your third-rate connate spiritual treasure, how is the power of my gigantic spirit hammer? It's called the gigantic spirit hammer. The three-eyed wolf's gaze paused on the gigantic spirit hammer, and then it said frankly, It's indeed a little stronger than the third-rate connate spiritual treasure I'm guarding. More than a little? Lin Feng shook his head. He did not bother to argue with the wolf. Now you should believe me, right? I believe that the gigantic spirit hammer is made of withered wood, but why should I believe that it's you who refined it? The three-eyed wolf was still a little uneasy and doubtful. F***ck. Are you done yet? Lin Feng's patience ran out as he glared at the three-eyed wolf. Without waiting for the three-eyed giant wolf to speak, he changed into a fierce expression and threatened, Anyway, you only have two choices. Either we cooperate and each of us gets the benefits, or you fight with me now. You choose. Is there no other choice? No. But, shut up. Lin Feng was flustered and exasperated by the three-eyed wolf. His whole body was restless, and he almost could not help but kill this stupid wolf. The three-eyed wolf looked at the gigantic spirit hammer, and then looked at Lin Feng's unfriendly eyes. It swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and after hesitating for a long time, it showed an expression as if it was about to go to hell. It nodded fiercely. Then let's cooperate. That's right. Lin Feng said, Give me back my gigantic spirit hammer. The three-eyed wolf said with a pained expression, Can you leave it with me first, as a memento? Memento your head, hurry up and give it back to me. Lin Feng could not help but fly into a rage again. This stupid wolf was definitely the funniest wolf he had ever seen. It definitely had the ability to infuriate people to death. The three-eyed wolf reluctantly said, Oh, okay then. It slowly released the claws on the gigantic spirit hammer, and finally swatted it away. Lin Feng grabbed it with one hand, turned around and said, Let's go, first come with me to pick up two people. After we pick them up, we will start moving. Wait. The three-eyed wolf said, Then what about my third-rate innate spiritual treasure? Keep holding it? Lin Feng did not look back and threw a spatial ring over, just use your spiritual power to put it into the spatial ring. To Lin Feng, this was not a rare item. He could make as many as he wanted. This is the spatial ring of the human world? The three-eyed wolf seemed to have gotten a new toy, and immediately played with it happily. Amazing! Its love for the spatial ring seemed to have far surpassed its love for the third-rate innate spiritual treasure it was guarding. Lin Feng urged, "Stop playing, quickly put it away and get ready to go." "Oh, okay." The three-eyed wolf put the spatial ring on one of its claws, and then flew away with Lin Feng. Before long, Lin Feng and the three-eyed wolf returned to the place where Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were cultivating. At this time, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing had already broken through the limit of perfection and reached the half-step king realm. Moreover, their wills were getting stronger and stronger, and their energy fluctuations were becoming more and more frightening. They were like boiling water that could explode at any time. Fortunately, this was the outer edge of the barren source land. Although they caused quite a commotion, they were not discovered by others. Lin Feng and the three-eyed wolf stood guard. After about 3 days, Jing Ting finally broke through first. Boom! A powerful will spread out in all directions with Jing Ting as the center. Trees, flowers, and grass were all broken, and gravel and dust were swept into the air. It was a spectacular sight. As if stimulated by this will, Huang Wenbing's holy ruler will instinctively rebounded, and at once, he broke through to become a holy ruler. For a moment, the two holy ruler wills crazily attacked the surroundings. After a long time, the surroundings finally calmed down. Jing Ting opened her eyes and said happily, "Lin Feng, I broke through." "Congratulations!" Lin Feng smiled. "Ha ha ha ha. Boss, I broke through too. I became a holy ruler." Huang Wenbing was very excited. "When we go back this time, Nono will be so jealous of us." Lin Feng said, "All right, don't be happy yet. Quickly stabilize your cultivation and temper your holy ruler wills. Don't fall back to half-step king." After about a few more hours, Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing both ended their cultivation. Although their cultivation had not completely stabilized, after a period of consolidation, they did not have to worry about falling back to half-step king. The three-eyed wolf asked, "Lin Feng, are you done? We've been waiting for a few days." It had originally agreed to cooperate reluctantly because of Lin Feng's threat, but now it seemed a little impatient. This was a wolf that did not want to be left out. All right, let's set off right away," said Lin Feng. After answering the three-eyed wolf, Lin Feng told Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing his plan. In the end, the 3 people and 1 beast hurriedly left this place where they had stayed for more than 3 months. Chapter 756. The Desolate Source Lands. The three-eyed giant wolf led Lin Feng's group in a certain direction and stopped about 300 li away. In front of them was a flat ground with lush green grass growing on it. "Here." Looking at the ground, Lin Feng frowned. The three-eyed giant wolf nodded. "The ground here is hollow, the treasure is inside. Move aside, I'll try first." Lin Feng planned to punch a hole in the ground. "No need." The three-eyed giant wolf stopped him. "This is a camouflage we can just go through." "Such a realistic camouflage?" Huang Wenbing was a little doubtful. The three-eyed giant wolf glanced at him. "It's up to you to believe it or not." Lin Feng said, "All right, let's go." The 4 carefully landed, but their feet did not touch the ground. They went through the ground as if they were passing through a layer of air and continued to sink. "It really is a camouflage," Huang Wenbing said in surprise. "What a magical place." The desolate source lands are the most magical places in the world. Anything can happen here. You won't find it strange when you see it more in the future," the three-eyed giant wolf said. After passing through the surface, the scenery around them changed. The surrounding temperature rose sharply, and a fiery red light flickered. It was like an underground cave. Under their feet there was a huge lava lake. The hot lava was rolling in the lava lake. Occasionally, some bubbles would appear, releasing a scorching hot aura. In the center of the lava lake, there was a large piece of land. Dozens of ancient red leaf trees grew quietly. Between the branches and leaves of the ancient trees, traces of lava could be vaguely seen. Be careful, this is the one-eyed flame demon's territory. It must have discovered us. The three-eyed giant wolf warned solemnly. This guy likes to stay in the lava, waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack the enemy. Lin Feng nodded and asked, "How strong is it?" The three-eyed giant wolf's mouth twitched, "About the same as me." From the three-eyed giant wolf's reaction, it seemed to have suffered a loss at the hands of the one-eyed flame demon. "You fought before?" Lin Feng asked curiously. "That's not right. You're all guardian sacred beasts, why would you fight?" Huang Wenbing was puzzled. "Who told you that we are guardian sacred beasts?" The three-eyed giant wolf rolled its eyes. "Guardian beast is just a name given to us by the humans outside. In fact, our true identities are weapon spirit." Lin Feng was shocked. "Artifact spirit." The three-eyed wolf sighed and said bitterly and sadly, "Every natural spirit treasure has an item spirit. I am the item spirit of the blue water sword, and the one-eyed flame devil is the item spirit of the flame shadow water dividing shuttle. Strictly speaking, a natural spirit treasure without an item spirit is not a complete natural spirit treasure." "Then why are you so hostile towards humans?" Lin Feng asked. If the three-eyed giant wolf was the artifact spirit, why would it be so vigilant against him? Why would it rather die in battle than let the innate spiritual treasure fall into his hands? Hearing this, the three-eyed giant wolf glared at Lin Feng with hatred. "It's all because of you humans." Lin Feng was puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Because you humans think that the artifact spirit is not only unable to increase the power of the innate spiritual treasure, but also a potential threat. The artifact spirit has its own consciousness and has its own emotions. It's not easy for humans to control it, and it's easy for accidents to happen at critical moments. Therefore, every time the humans obtained a natural spirit treasure, they would try their best to get rid of the artifact spirit. Over time, the relationship between the artifact spirits and humans became hostile." The three-eyed giant wolf said hatefully, "In the ancient times, the artifact spirit of every natural spirit treasure that was taken out of the desolate origin land would be destroyed. After a long period of time, no artifact spirit was willing to follow humans anymore. Because humans are not worthy of our trust. Humans have only brought us destruction, death, sorrow, and pain. We'd rather live in the barren lands forever, living a monotonous and boring life, than be killed by you humans." Humans again. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile bitterly. He couldn't remember how many similar things had been done by humans. First, it was the artifact spirit, then the monster, and finally the sacred beast Qilin, Xingfeng, Lin Hai, and so on. The souls of humans had been stained with grave sins, and even the ninefold Yuan water couldn't wash them away. The artifact spirit and the natural spirit treasure are one. If the natural spirit treasure is taken away, the artifact spirit will also be taken away. Therefore, in order to prevent the tragedy of the past from happening again, all the artifact spirits transformed into demonic beasts, which you call the sacred beast guardians. Once they discover anyone who wants to snatch the natural spirit treasure, they will use all their strength to kill them. Without the artifact spirit, can the natural spirit treasure really exert its full power? Yes, the natural spirit treasure without the artifact spirit is the same as the acquired spirit treasure that you refine. After hearing the three-eyed giant wolf's answer, Lin Feng didn't know how to judge. To be honest, although the actions of humans were somewhat selfish and cruel, from the standpoint of humans, they weren't wrong. The artifact spirit didn't have any other use besides being a potential threat to the natural spirit treasure. Humans had no reason to keep them. In other words, the conflict between the artifact spirit and humans was unresolvable. At this moment, the three-eyed giant wolf revealed a mocking smile. "You also think that the artifact spirit doesn't need to exist. Although I sympathize with your experience, from the standpoint of humans, their actions are understandable. Lin Feng didn't get angry but said frankly. You're very frank. The three-eyed giant wolf looked at Lin Feng in surprise. Lin Feng shrugged. I don't have the habit of lying. Since you're so frank, I'll tell you another secret. The three-eyed giant wolf glanced at the lava lake below and said in a low voice, Actually, the artifact spirit is the most important part of the natural spirit treasure. Why are you contradicting yourself? Huang Wenbing interrupted. You just said that the artifact spirit can't increase the power of the natural spirit treasure. Wenbing, don't talk. Listen to me, Lin Feng said. The three-eyed giant wolf said indifferently, Yes, the artifact spirit can't increase the power of the natural spirit treasure, but that doesn't mean that the artifact spirit has no value. All this time, no one knew that the artifact spirit is the core of the natural spirit treasure. Only natural spirit treasures with artifact spirits have the possibility of unlimited evolution. The strength of the artifact spirit determines the power of the natural spirit treasure. The stronger the artifact spirit, the more powerful the natural spirit treasure. And vice versa. As long as the artifact spirit is still present, a third-rate natural spirit treasure has the hope of evolving into a first-rate natural spirit treasure. Without the artifact spirit, the natural spirit treasure will forever remain at that level. Evolution. Lin Feng, Jingting, and Huang Wenbing looked at each other and gasped. This was the first time they had heard of such a theory. Ironically, the humans in the past didn't even understand the true function of the artifact spirit and killed them indiscriminately. As a result, the artifact spirit was forced to go against the humans before it could display its true power. The three-eyed giant wolf sighed and shook its head. After 1,000,000,000,000 years, no one has ever known this secret. You are the first to know this. Chapter 757. Lin Feng flipped his palm and took out the gigantic spirit divine hammer. He looked at it carefully and said, So, although the acquired spiritual treasure I refined is not inferior to an innate spiritual treasure, it still has a fatal flaw when compared to a real innate spiritual treasure. You can't say that. The three-eyed wolf looked warily at the one-eyed flame demon in the lava lake, who was either sleeping or secretly eavesdropping on their conversation. It said indifferently, Innate spiritual treasures have been reduced to the same level as acquired spiritual treasures in the hands of humans. To humans, there is no difference between innate spiritual treasures and acquired spiritual treasures. Sighing, Lin Feng put away the gigantic spirit divine hammer and asked, What are the conditions for an innate spiritual treasure to evolve? The three-eyed wolf's expression turned serious and said, Devour. Devour what? Weapon spirit. The three-eyed wolf lowered its head and pouted at the lava lake. When weapon spirits devour each other, they can evolve continuously. If I devour the one-eyed flame demon, I have a certain chance of evolving. The more I devour, the higher the chance of evolving. On the other hand, if the one-eyed flame demon devours me, it also has a certain chance of evolving. All the first-rate innate spiritual treasures in the desolate origin land came from this way. As its voice fell, the temperature in the lava lake seemed to have risen a little. The number of bubbles containing high temperature increased dramatically and rose to the surface. With an obvious look of surprise on his face, Lin Feng said emotionally, I didn't expect first-rate innate spiritual treasures to come from this way. It was the first time Lin Feng had heard of the theory of weapon spirits devouring each other to strengthen themselves and evolve innate spiritual treasures. No wonder he was so surprised. Lowering his head, Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and pondered. The acquired spiritual treasures he refined obviously did not have the characteristics of evolution and did not have weapon spirit. What exactly was the problem? After thinking for a while, Lin Feng still could not find the problem. Forget it, let's get the ancient trees first. Shaking his head, Lin Feng no longer bothered about the acquired spirit treasure not having an artifact spirit. He cast his gaze towards the center of the lava lake and used his mental energy to search the surroundings for traces of the one-eyed flame demon. He did not wish to be ambushed by the one-eyed flame demon when he was collecting the ancient trees. Compared to regular Saint Kings, Lin Feng had powerful attacks, but he lacked the corresponding defense and speed. Fortunately, the Thunder Punishment Saint King had given him the Sword God's Palace. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to fight against an Earth Saint King. His attacks were powerful enough to kill an Earth Saint King, but an Earth Saint King's attacks could also kill him without the Sword God's Palace. Seeing Lin Feng's actions, the three-eyed giant wolf said indifferently, "There's no need to look. I've already seen it just now. It's in the lava lake. I'll lure it up. Can the three of you take care of it together?" Lin Feng turned his head and asked through telepathy. The three-eyed giant wolf said indifferently, "As long as you can guarantee that it doesn't escape back into the lava lake, I have a way to take care of it." The lava lake was the one-eyed flame demon's territory. Its strength would be greatly increased in the lava lake. Last time, the three-eyed giant wolf had entered the lava lake unknowingly, causing it to suffer greatly at the hands of the one-eyed flame demon. This time, it would not recklessly charge into the lava lake. "Boss, go lure it up." Huang Wenbing was full of confidence. "We three Saint Kings. Can't we deal with a mere one-eyed flame demon?" Glancing at Huang Wenbing, the three-eyed giant wolf did not refute. Indeed, the one-eyed flame demon that had left the lava lake was only comparable to a regular Saint King. It was not worth mentioning. "All right then. Be careful. I'll go lure it." Having obtained the three-eyed giant wolf's assurance, Lin Feng relaxed and flew toward the center of the lava lake. However, his gaze was searching beneath his feet, constantly on guard against the one-eyed flame demon's sneak attack. The one-eyed flame demon was very calm. Other than making a slight movement when the three-eyed giant wolf mentioned that the item spirits could devour each other, it did not make any other sound, as if it was dead. However, as Lin Feng approached the center of the lava lake, the one-eyed flame demon became more and more impatient. There were a few times when it could not help but want to attack. When Lin Feng was only 100 meters away from the center of the lava lake, the one-eyed flame demon was finally forced to show itself. Roar! The one-eyed flame demon let out a low roar. Its gigantic figure, which was like a flame giant, directly charged toward Lin Feng. The three-eyed giant wolf, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly surrounded it. Three powerful wills suddenly locked onto the one-eyed flame demon, causing its swift figure to tremble slightly in midair, greatly reducing its speed. Lin Feng had an idea. He took out the gigantic divine spirit hammer and threw it toward Huang Wenbing. "Wenbing, catch it. It's that acquired spiritual treasure." Huang Wenbing leaped over Jing Ting and the three-eyed giant wolf's heads and caught the gigantic divine spirit hammer. Taking advantage of the momentum, he unleashed a powerful attack. Power break. Don't forget that Huang Wenbing was also an earth elementalist who cultivated the law of strength. After becoming a Saint King, his comprehension of the law of strength had reached perfection. The power of the law of strength that he comprehended from the law of strength was far from what an ordinary Saint King could compare to. If anyone dared to treat him as a new Saint King, they would definitely die a horrible death. With a thunderous force, the gigantic divine spirit hammer violently smashed down on the one-eyed flame demon's head. Boom! The one-eyed flame demon's head was smashed out of shape by the gigantic divine spirit hammer. The power of its will also dissipated. It let out a roar of pain. Sword of Aurora. At the same time, Jing Ting's attack came one after another. Jing Ting had refined the Saint King godhead left behind by Lin Hai, the ancestor of the Lin clan. She mainly cultivated the law of light and the law of darkness. Compared to the other 5 laws, the power of the law of light and the law of darkness was very close to the 7 supreme laws and was comparable to the law of speed. With the fusion of light and darkness, the power increased exponentially. It could even surpass a single one of the 7 supreme laws. Therefore, Jing Ting's attack could not be underestimated. Even if she had not fused the law of light and the law of darkness, the law of light alone still had a powerful attack power that was very close to the 7 supreme laws. Swish! A light blade flew out from the blade of the sword in Jing Ting's hand. It slashed across the one-eyed flame demon's waist and cut it in half. It looked like it was easier than cutting tofu. The one-eyed flame demon's body that had been cut in half emitted a burnt smell. The high temperature of the light blade was something that even the one-eyed flame demon, who played with fire, could not withstand. However, its body structure was very special. It was like magma but not magma. Even if it was cut in half, it was still connected and slowly healed. After being attacked by Huang Wenbing and Jing Ting, the one-eyed flame demon had not yet recovered from the pain when it was attacked by the three-eyed wolf again. Compared to human saint kings and mastiff kings, weapon spirits were more like pure wild beasts. They did not have any special attack method. Their only attack methods were the most primitive ones, such as tearing, biting, bumping, and so on. The three-eyed giant wolf rushed to the side of the one-eyed flaming demon and bit down on its head. Bang! Half of the one-eyed flame demon's head was bitten off by the three-eyed wolf. It could not help but cry out again. Roar! It hugged its missing head and struggled in the air. Miraculously, its head quickly recovered. The price was that its physical body had shrunk a little. Grr! The three-eyed wolf chewed the head that it had bitten off a few times and swallowed it. Then it licked its lips as if it had not had enough. Its aura had actually strengthened by about 10% after devouring this small half of the head. Under the continuous attacks of Jing Ting, Huang Wenbing, and the three-eyed wolf, the one-eyed flame demon could not resist at all. It became a punching bag for Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing, and food for the three-eyed wolf. On the other side, Lin Feng kept moving. With his fastest speed, he kept the dozen or so red ancient trees at the center of the magma lake into space one. He also took the third-rate Khanate spirit treasure, Flame Shadow Water Dividing Shuttle, that the one-eyed flame demon was guarding. Six-fold art. When Lin Feng turned his head, he saw that the others were still fighting with the one-eyed flame demon. He shook his head and stretched out his hand, throwing a punch over. The one-eyed flame demon, which was already powerless under the attacks of Jing Ting, Huang Wenbing, and the three-eyed wolf, was hit by Lin Feng's fatal punch. Its body immediately shook and let out an earth-shattering scream. Its huge body exploded on the spot. "Boss, we haven't had enough yet," Huang Wenbing shouted. Lin Feng said with a half-smile, "Is that so? Then why don't we spar?" Cough. Huang Wenbing almost choked to death. "Spar with you? Do you think I'm stupid?" On the other side, seeing that the one-eyed flame demon was blown apart by Lin Feng's punch, the three-eyed wolf immediately opened its bloody mouth. A powerful suction force came out of its mouth, and the fragments of the one-eyed flame demon's body were all devoured by it. Nothing was left. Lin Feng, it seems to have become stronger. Jing Ting blinked. Lin Feng's expression became more serious. It has become stronger. The three-eyed wolf's aura rose steadily, almost reaching twice its previous strength. Its body also grew rapidly, from a large truck to a medium-sized yacht. The magma lake below was violently shaking due to the unrestrained aura. The land at the center of the magma lake was also shaken until it finally sank and disappeared from the sight of Lin Feng and the others. So strong. I'm no match for it. I just don't know if boss can beat it. I don't know if we haven't fought before, Lin Feng said seriously. Its current strength is about the same as a top-tier veteran Saint King. A top-tier veteran Saint King was naturally a veteran Saint King who had a Khanate spiritual treasure. Right. Lin Feng thought of the Flame Shadow Water-Splitting Shuttle and immediately took it out, throwing it to the three-eyed wolf. "Old wolf, take it. No, bite it." The three-eyed wolf turned its head and looked at Lin Feng gratefully. It immediately took out the jade water sword from its spatial ring and held it in its mouth to block the flame shadow water-splitting shuttle. When the two third-rate connate spiritual treasures met, the flame shadow water-splitting shuttle quickly turned into a pool of glowing liquid and merged with the jade water sword. The jade water sword shone brightly, and a destructive force suddenly spread out. A top-tier third-rate connate spiritual treasure, Lin Feng said in surprise. It really evolved. Chapter 758. Even though he had learned from the three-eyed giant wolf that connate spiritual treasures could evolve, Lin Feng still could not hide his shock when he saw it with his own eyes. Lin Feng stared at the jade water sword that had evolved into a top third-rate connate spiritual treasure and was speechless for a long time. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing were also stunned by the scene before them. Their throats were so dry that they could not make a sound for a long time. After an unknown period of time, Lin Feng gradually came back to his senses. Suppressing the evil thoughts in his heart, he took a deep breath and forced his gaze away from the jade water sword. Looking at the three-eyed giant wolf, he clasped his fists and said, "Congratulations." The three-eyed giant wolf, who had been wary of Lin Feng and the other two, saw this scene. The mockery in its eyes gradually faded and was replaced by surprise. "Are you not going to snatch the jade water sword?" The three-eyed giant wolf could not help but ask the question in its heart. It had not seen many humans, but humans had long been known as creatures among the weapon spirit. Selfish, greedy, cunning, and so on. These impressions had long been deeply imprinted in its heart. Only when Lin Feng appeared did it gradually break its understanding of humans. Lin Feng seemed to be somewhat different from the humans in its impression. What use do I have for a connate spiritual treasure without a weapon spirit? Lin Feng sighed and shook his head. He did not deny that he had once thought of killing the weapon spirit to steal the treasure. I can refine acquired spiritual treasures at any time. Besides, no matter how much I desire it, I cannot cross my bottom line and do such a thing. The three-eyed giant wolf looked deeply at Lin Feng. You are very special. You are not like other humans. Can I take this as a compliment? Lin Feng smiled faintly, then turned and flew into the sky. Let's go. We don't have much time left. Let's get some more ancient trees while we are still away. Putting away the jade water sword, the three-eyed giant wolf stepped on the lava lake with its hind legs. Immediately, the boiling lava splashed as its body leapt into the air and flew straight up. The three people and one beast flew together to the next treasure location. Old Wolf, do you know where I can get the Saint Monarch fruit? Lin Feng's eyes flashed with anticipation. From the very beginning, he had been thinking about the Saint Monarch fruit. It was a treasure that could greatly increase the power of a Saint Monarch's will. It was something that Lin Feng needed the most right now. The three-eyed giant wolf stopped and looked at Lin Feng in surprise. You want the Holy Monarch fruit? Not bothering to hide his desire for the Saint Monarch fruit, Lin Feng nodded and asked nervously, Do you know where I can find it? I do. There's a place not far from here, but... The three-eyed giant wolf hesitated for a moment. It's best to wait until I advance. Lin Feng's curiosity was piqued by the three-eyed giant wolf's words. He asked tentatively, Is that place very dangerous? It's not an ordinary danger. With a solemn expression on its face, the three-eyed wolf spoke in a low and trembling voice. In your human language, the guardian beast of the Saint King fruit is no weaker than a titled Saint King. His. Lin Feng and the other two sucked in a breath of cold air. Titled Saint King. So, it's best that we don't provoke it now. The three-eyed giant wolf was not surprised by Lin Feng and the other two's reaction. Its eyes flashed with deep fear as it reminded, although you're strong, you're definitely not its match. It then added, even if the four of us work together, we'll only be killed by it in an instant. So, don't take any chances. Lin Feng nodded solemnly. Don't worry, I know what to do. Although the pseudo-spiritual treasures in his spatial ring could deal with titled Saint Kings, they were his life-saving trump card. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not use them all. Otherwise, if he encountered any danger, he would not be able to resist at all. We don't have a chance now, but that doesn't mean we won't in the future. The three-eyed giant wolf comforted. As long as I continue to devour other artifact spirits, it won't be long before I have the same strength. At that time, the Saint Monarch fruit will be within reach. At this point, Lin Feng could only choose to believe in the three-eyed giant wolf. Compared to humans, artifact spirits were not as cunning. They were also simple and honest. Since the three-eyed giant wolf had promised, it would definitely do its best to help Lin Feng in the future. As for whether he could obtain the Saint Monarch fruit in the end, it would depend on Lin Feng's luck. 3 days later, the three-eyed giant wolf's strength had reached the limit of a top-notch veteran Saint King. It was only a step away from becoming a titled Saint King. The Jade Water Sword had also reached the limit of a third-rate innate spiritual treasure. It only needed to merge with another third-rate innate spiritual treasure to evolve into a second-rate innate spiritual treasure. The three-eyed giant wolf had waited for this day for too long. It was so long that its memory was a little blurry. Its lantern-sized eyes glanced at Lin Feng with a hint of gratitude. If not for the help of Lin Feng and the other two, it would never have been able to grow to this level in its lifetime. Among the artifact spirits of third-rate innate spiritual treasures, it was not the weakest, but it was nowhere near the strongest. If there were no accidents, its fate in this life would be to be devoured by another powerful artifact spirit and become a stepping stone for another artifact spirit. The Jade Water Sword would also become nourishment for another innate spiritual treasure to evolve. After devouring another innate spiritual treasure, the Jade Water Sword will evolve. The three-eyed giant wolf could not suppress its excitement. Its eyes shone with excitement. And I, the great three-eyed giant wolf, will also evolve into a second-rate artifact spirit. The artifact spirits of third-rate innate spiritual treasures were third-rate, the artifact spirits of second-rate innate spiritual treasures were second-rate, and the artifact spirits of first-rate innate spiritual treasures were first-rate. Although third-rate artifact spirits, second-rate artifact spirits, and first-rate artifact spirits seemed simple, the difference between the three levels was like heaven and earth. Not to mention artifact spirits of different levels, even artifact spirits of the same level had a huge gap. There was an unimaginable gap between a first-rate third-rate artifact spirit and a first-rate third-rate artifact spirit. This gap was so big that the former could effortlessly kill the latter. The three-eyed giant wolf used to be an extremely mediocre existence among third-rate artifact spirit. But now, the three-eyed giant wolf was definitely a first-rate third-rate artifact spirit. It only needed to devour another artifact spirit to evolve into a second-rate artifact spirit. Even if it was just a first-rate artifact spirit, it was still a second-rate artifact spirit, which was extraordinary. For artifact spirits, every level was a huge watershed. Once they broke through, their strength would undergo a tremendous change. Seeing the three-eyed giant wolf so excited that it could not control itself, Lin Feng was also secretly happy for it. Just like humans, artifact spirits also lived by the survival of the fittest, and it was even crueler than humans. The three-eyed giant wolf's evolution into a second-rate artifact spirit meant that it would leave the bottom of the food chain and become a mid-level predator. This was naturally something to be happy about. After all, the stronger the three-eyed giant wolf was, the better it was for Lin Feng. Let's hope it keeps its promise. After spending a few days with the three-eyed giant wolf, Lin Feng really did not want to be its enemy. Although he was wary of a second-rate artifact spirit, he was not afraid. He had 2,880 pseudo-spirit treasures hidden in his spatial ring, which gave him enough confidence to talk to a titled Saint King. However, my harvest these few days is not bad either. Lin Feng's mental energy swept through Space One, and a smile appeared on his face. According to the classification of artifact spirits, there were already 13 first-rate ancient trees in Space One, 152 second-rate ancient trees, and countless third-rate ancient trees. They piled up into a mountain of 10,000 meters high, which dazzled the eyes. At this moment, the three-eyed giant wolf slowly calmed down and said seriously, "Devour another artifact spirit, and I will accompany you to snatch the Saint Monarch fruit." "You don't want to wait a little longer?" Lin Feng said. "I don't mind waiting a few more days." He felt that if the three-eyed giant wolf devoured more artifact spirits, it would become stronger and their chances of snatching the Saint Monarch fruit would be higher. Hearing this, the three-eyed giant wolf shook its head. "You don't know, but every artifact spirit can only devour artifact spirits of the same level, and cannot devour artifact spirits of a lower level. Therefore, after I advance, I can only devour second-rate artifact spirit. The guardian saint beast guarding the Saint Monarch fruit is comparable to a second-rate artifact spirit, or even slightly weaker. I am confident that I can take it down." "I see." Lin Feng was enlightened. No wonder second-rate and first-rate innate spirit treasures are so rare. With the restriction of level, the difficulty of advancing artifact spirits was undoubtedly many times higher. "Let me tell you another secret." The three-eyed giant wolf licked its lips and said in a low voice, "The guardian saint beast guarding the Saint Monarch fruit is not an artifact spirit." Lin Feng, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing were all shocked. The three-eyed giant wolf was very satisfied with the effect of its words. It smirked and said, "Innate spirit treasures have artifact spirits, and heavenly materials and earthly treasures naturally have similar existences. However, they are not called artifact spirits, but medicine spirit. Herb spirits are the same as artifact spirits, they can devour each other to advance, and the natural treasures they are guarding can also evolve continuously." "The Saint Monarch fruit can evolve?" Lin Feng was shocked beyond words. An enhanced version of the Saint Monarch fruit? This was definitely the most exciting moment Lin Feng had been in the desolate plain for several months. "I don't know what the Saint Monarch fruit will look like after it evolves, because I have never seen it before." The three-eyed giant wolf shook its head lightly and said with certainty, however, "I can be sure that the evolved Saint Monarch fruit will not only have the original effect of the Saint Monarch fruit, but also have new effects. Most importantly, the evolved Saint Monarch fruit's effects will be much stronger than before." Then, it concluded, "Therefore I suggest that you two cooperate." This was an extremely tempting suggestion. Lin Feng asked, "How do we cooperate?" "Cooperate with it the same way you cooperate with me." The three-eyed giant wolf said, "We helped it devour other herb spirits, so it should at least express some gratitude, right? As long as it can evolve, even if it gives you half of the Saint Monarch fruit, I believe it won't mind." No one knew better than the three-eyed giant wolf the artifact spirits and herb spirits' thirst for power and their persistence to evolve. Will it agree? Lin Feng was somewhat tempted. Chapter 759. If we try, there's still hope. If we don't, there's no hope at all. Rolling its eyes, the three-eyed giant wolf revealed a vicious expression. "If it dares to disagree, watch how I deal with it. Medicine spirits are weaker than weapon spirit. Since we're both at level 2, it most likely won't be able to defeat me." Lin Feng said leisurely, "Let's talk about this after you've advanced to level 2. Let's go and devour the last weapon spirit." Impatient, the three-eyed giant wolf sped up and its figure suddenly blurred. 4 hours later, in the sky above a remote wasteland, the three-eyed giant wolf's aura surged. It broke through the shackles of level 3 in one go, and its strength underwent an earth-shattering change. After a long time, Its aura gradually stabilized and stopped at level 2. At the same time, the Jade Water Sword also evolved into a second-rate innate spirit treasure. Its power increased by several times. Traces of destructive green halo flowed on the surface of the sword, releasing a frightening aura. Smacking its lips, the three-eyed giant wolf recalled the taste of devouring the weapon spirit and said regretfully, "What a pity, I'm afraid I won't have the chance to taste it again. If we can persuade the medicine spirit to cooperate, you two can team up and defeat the other weapon spirits." Lin Feng smiled faintly. On the surface, he was comforting the three-eyed giant wolf, but in reality, he was secretly on guard. Now that the three-eyed giant wolf's strength had increased greatly, it was comparable to the weakest titled Holy King. Even though Lin Feng had a pseudo-spirit treasure, he still did not dare to let his guard down. Fortunately, the three-eyed giant wolf did not turn hostile after its advancement. Instead, it said excitedly, "Oh right, if I team up with it we can totally devour other weapon spirit. Lin Feng, you're really smart." Rolling his eyes at the three-eyed giant wolf, Lin Feng thought to himself, "It's not that I'm smart, it's you who's stupid. Let's go and find that medicine spirit." After advancing, the three-eyed giant wolf's courage had increased by a lot. Originally, it feared the medicine spirit like a tiger, but now it was eager to give it a try. It looked like it could not wait and was even more anxious than Lin Feng. The three-eyed giant wolf continued to lead the way while Lin Feng, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing followed behind. They passed through a barren land, traversed a few large mountains, leaped over a few long rivers, and spent over a day of time before finally arriving at their destination, the Violet Stone Bamboo Forest. The first thing that entered their line of sight was a bamboo forest that was like a violet-colored ocean. Unlike ordinary bamboo forests, these bamboos before them weren't made of wood, but were instead grown from violet-colored stones. A few figures flashed down from the sky and moved through the violet stone bamboo forest, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the center of the bamboo forest. He saw more than 10 giant stone bamboos growing in a circle. The diameter of these stone bamboos were all 5 to 8 meters. The diameter of the stone bamboos in the center was an astonishing 15 meters. It was larger than all the ancient trees Lin Feng had seen before. A vigilant gaze was cast over from the giant stone bamboo in the center. Passing through the layers of purple bamboo leaves, Lin Feng's pupils suddenly shrank. "A hedgehog! What hedgehog?" Looking at Lin Feng in confusion, the three-eyed giant wolf's expression turned serious. Its gaze also fell on the small figure. "That's the Saint Monarch Fruit's herb spirit, the 10,000 Needles pine beast. It's a beginner grade 2 herb spirit." Jing Ting blinked her eyes. "It's so cute. Is this thing really a grade 2 herb spirit?" Huang Wenbing was a little doubtful. "It's so small. I can kill dozens of them with one slap." Taking a deep breath, the three-eyed giant wolf warned, "Don't underestimate it. As a grade 2 herb spirit, its battle prowess isn't inferior to a human titled Saint King. The spikes on its body are abnormally powerful. Grade 1 herb spirits and grade 1 tool spirits will die upon contact. Even though I've advanced to grade 2, I still don't dare to underestimate it." After warning Huang Wenbing, the three-eyed giant wolf turned around and slowly walked toward the 10,000 Needles pine beast. You stop right there." A soft and gentle voice was heard. This voice sounded very gentle, and could melt the heart of a person with a heart of stone. "Sorry to disturb you." The three-eyed giant wolf stopped and tried to make his expression as friendly as possible. "Don't be agitated. We're not here to find trouble with you. You should know me. I'm the three-eyed giant wolf from the Iron Eagle Valley." The 10,000 Needles pine beast was puzzled. "You're that little wolf? Aren't you a grade 3 tool spirit? It's good that you recognize me." Heaving a sigh of relief, the three-eyed giant wolf patiently explained, "I cooperated with those humans, and with their help, I devoured more than a dozen Grade 3 artifact spirits and advanced to a Grade 2 artifact spirit. You actually worked with humans. The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast was abnormally shocked. Looking at the three-eyed giant wolf, his gaze became vigilant again. There was a hint of anger in his voice. Don't misunderstand. Seeing the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast's reaction, the three-eyed giant wolf instantly cursed in his heart. He hurriedly explained, "They're different from other humans. They can be trusted. We're here to work with you." With a cold gaze, the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast angrily rebuked, "Don't say anything. Either we fight, and if I lose, I'll be at your disposal. As for working with me, don't even think about it." Its reaction was more intense than Lin Feng and the rest imagined. "What do we have to do to make you agree to work with us?" Frowning slightly, Lin Feng asked in a deep voice. "Humph." The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast coldly snorted. "I won't work with you." Obviously, it wasn't that it didn't want to work with them, but it didn't trust humans at all. Seeing the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast's stubbornness, the three-eyed giant wolf was a little angry. He suppressed his anger and stared at the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast. "You'll regret this." "Shut up, you traitor." The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast's spikes stood up and made a fighting stance. "I will never work with you." Hearing the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast calling him a traitor, the three-eyed giant wolf exploded in anger. At this moment, it threw everything to the back of its mind. Its lantern-like eyes turned red in an instant. Locking its gaze on the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast, the three-eyed giant wolf narrowed its eyes and said to Lin Feng and the rest, "Lin Feng, you guys stay away." The three nodded and quickly retreated away from the center of the stone bamboos. They couldn't intervene in the battle between the Level 2 Artifact Spirit and Level 2 Medicine Spirit. If they stayed, they would only be a burden to the three-eyed giant wolf. Their footsteps intertwined, and in the blink of an eye, they retreated hundreds of feet away. Quietly staring at the three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast, Lin Feng was ready to summon his pseudo-spiritual treasure at any time. If the three-eyed giant wolf could defeat or even persuade the 10,000 Needles Pine Beast, it would be a happy ending. However, if the three-eyed giant wolf lost, then he would have to intervene. Although the pseudo-spiritual treasure was precious, he could refine it with time. But the three-eyed giant wolf's life, and even their own lives, only had one chance. He knew what was more important. "Finally can't stand it anymore?" The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast sneered. "Just now you were pretending to cooperate." The three-eyed giant wolf's eyes narrowed, but its expression did not change. It said lightly, "Whatever you say. Let's fight." "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast was not afraid at all. It did not put the three-eyed giant wolf in its eyes at all. As it spoke, the spikes on its body tightened, emitting a dangerous aura. A deafening roar came from its mouth. The three-eyed giant wolf's huge body suddenly jumped up. The powerful recoil caused the ground to sink a few feet, forming a huge oval pit. 10,000 needles! The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast's oval body suddenly trembled. The spikes on its body suddenly separated from its body and stabbed at the three-eyed giant wolf. The three-eyed giant wolf that was in midair suddenly accelerated and dodged the dense spike. Chase! The 10,000 Needles Pine Beast immediately controlled the 10,000 spikes to chase after the three-eyed giant wolf and formed a fan shape, intending to surround the three-eyed giant wolf. The three-eyed giant wolf's body fell back to the ground, creating a deep pit. The three-eyed giant wolf looked at the 10,000 spikes that were chasing after it, and its pupils suddenly shrank. Roar! It opened its bloody mouth, and a roar unlike the three-eyed giant wolf's roar came out from its mouth. It shook the three-eyed giant wolf's fur and made it tremble. The 10,000 spikes were stopped in midair by this roar, unable to move an inch further. A level 2 artifact spirit is indeed powerful. Lin Feng sighed softly. If this were the outside world, the power of this old wolf's roar would probably be enough to shatter hundreds of thousands of planets and destroy a nebula. Huang Wenbing's heart still palpitated. A titled Holy King is actually so powerful. The scene changed. The three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles pine beast faced off for a moment, and a new round of battle began. The exciting battle presented itself in front of Lin Feng and the other two, and it constantly stimulated their little hearts. After about an hour, the 10,000 needles pine beast was gradually at a disadvantage. While its power was not any weaker than the three-eyed giant wolf, and it was even slightly stronger than the three-eyed giant wolf, but its combat power was still slightly weaker than the three-eyed giant wolf. After all, the three-eyed giant wolf was the artifact spirit of the second-rate pre-creation spiritual treasure Blue Water Sword. As an artifact spirit, it was naturally best at fighting, and fighting was almost its instinct. Naturally, it was not something that the 10,000 needles pine beast, a level 2 medicine spirit, could compete with. Both artifact spirits and medicine spirits had their own specialties. Unfortunately, artifact spirits were best at fighting. Once the two began to fight, the artifact spirit would have an innate advantage. Boom! The three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles pine beast clashed together. The former's fur was pierced with many bloody holes of various sizes, while the latter was directly knocked away, and its aura was weakened by a bit. This exciting battle was finally coming to an end. Since you're not willing to cooperate, then there's no need for you to exist. A cold voice came out of its mouth. The three-eyed giant wolf's aura surged, and like a strong magnetic field, it covered a radius of 100 feet, causing the sand and stones to fly away, the grass and trees to tremble, and the huge ancient stone bamboo tree to shake violently. It was ready to give the 10,000 needles pine beast the final blow, and also the most fatal one. The 10,000 needles pine beast's eyes dimmed. It was very unwilling to be killed by a junior like the three-eyed giant wolf. But no matter how unwilling it was, it had to face the cruel reality. It had existed for 1 trillion years, and it had grown step by step from a level 3 medicine spirit to its current level. Finally, it was going to disappear from this world. However, at this critical moment Lin Feng said, "Old wolf, wait." Chapter 760. Lin Feng walked over with steady step. A look of regret flashed in his eyes. He sighed and said, "Let it go. We just need to take half of the sage monarch fruit. There is no need to kill it." His gaze fell on the 10,000 needles pine beast in the middle of the purple stone bamboo forest. Without the 10,000 needles pine beast, they could still find other spirit herbs to cooperate with, but it would take more time. "Okay, I'll listen to you." After a moment of silence, the three-eyed wolf slowly nodded. The one who needed the 10,000 needles pine beast's help was Lin Feng. Now that Lin Feng had spoken, there was no need for it to refuse. Jing Ting and Huang Wenbing had nothing to say. They would never object to Lin Feng's decisions. "Human." The 10,000 needles pine beast, with a trace of blood at the corner of its mouth, coldly said, "Don't think that you can fool me by putting on an act. Let me tell you, I won't fall for it. You really don't know what's good for you." The three-eyed wolf was enraged, its aura erupting again. "Old wolf, forget it." Shaking his head at the three-eyed wolf, Lin Feng did not take the 10,000 needles pine beast's words to heart. "I'll go get the Saint Monarch fruit first." As his voice fell, Lin Feng's vigorous figure swept across a distance of several dozen meters, arriving at the giant stone bamboo in the middle of the purple stone bamboo forest. At the top of the largest stone bamboo, a dark red fruit emitting a delicate fragrance lay quietly. It was the target of Lin Feng's group this time. If only this Saint Monarch fruit could grow into a first-rate treasure. Although he had obtained the Saint Monarch fruit, Lin Feng could not help but feel a little regretful. Stretching out his thin right hand, Lin Feng's palm chopped down on the Saint Monarch fruit. Puff. The dark red Saint King fruit was immediately split into two halves by the palm blade, revealing the bright red juicy flesh within. The fragrance that seeped into one's heart became even more intense. It was as if one's strength would immediately increase by a large margin just by taking a single breath. At the same time, the 10,000 needles pine beast's aura suddenly fell, as if half of its strength had been cut out of thin air. We'll take this half and leave the other half to you. After putting half of the Saint King fruit into Space One, Lin Feng jumped down from the top of the stone bamboo and threw the other half to the 10,000 needles burr beast. A small hand covered in needles quickly caught the remaining half of the Saint Monarch fruit. As soon as the Saint Monarch fruit touched the hand, it immediately transformed back into a complete Saint Monarch fruit, but its size was about half of what it used to be, and the fragrance it used to give off was also gone. After obtaining the remaining half of the Saint King fruit, the 10,000 needles burr beast's eyes were filled with doubt. Perhaps it had never thought that Lin Feng would actually return the remaining half of the Saint Monarch fruit to it. He must be putting on an act. He must be. The 10,000 needles beast did not believe that Lin Feng would give up on the Saint Monarch fruit. Even if it was only half, the Saint Monarch fruit's charm was still irresistible. While it was thinking, it heard a few explosions. Looking carefully, it saw that the bottom of the stone bamboo that held the Saint Monarch fruit had been shattered by Lin Feng's punch, and then the entire stone bamboo was taken by Lin Feng. The 10,000 needles beast's eyes became more and more confused. It thought to itself, what does this human mean by taking away the stone bamboo? He's a refiner. The three-eyed wolf slowly said, these stone bamboos can be used to refine acquired spirit treasures. You can think of them as innate spirit treasures without artifact spirit. The needles all over its body trembled. The 10,000 needles beast's pupils suddenly shrank. He can refine innate spirit treasures. Hearing this, the three-eyed wolf glanced at it and did not say anything else. Moments later, the stone bamboo that held the Saint Monarch fruit and the dozen other stone bamboos around it were all taken by Lin Feng into Space One. The thin figure slowly flew back. Lin Feng said to the three-eyed wolf, "Okay, let's go." "Okay." The huge wolf head gently nodded. The three-eyed giant wolf glanced at the 10,000 needle pine burr beast and slowly turned around. Both of its legs suddenly stomped on the ground. Its huge body leaped into the air and flew into the distance. Lin Feng, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing also flew up, not stopping for a moment. Does he really not want this half of the Saint Monarch fruit? A conflicted look flashed across its eyes as the 10,000 needles burr beast hesitated. Only at this moment did it realize that its guess seemed to be very different from the truth. A person who can refine a natural spirit treasure should be very powerful, right? Such a powerful person probably has no interest in lying to me. The value of the Saint Monarch fruit was between second-rate and first-rate innate spirit treasures. Since Lin Feng could refine innate spirit treasures, perhaps he really did not care about the Saint Monarch fruit. Lin Feng's generosity in giving away half of the Saint Monarch fruit seemed to prove this point. Just as Lin Feng and the rest were about to completely disappear from its sight, it finally shouted, "Wait." Compared to its body that was full of thorns, its voice was too gentle. However, Lin Feng and the rest had good hearing and clearly heard its voice. The group stopped in midair and turned to look at the source of the voice. It was the 10,000 needles beast. Is there anything else? Lin Feng, who had long given up on cooperating with the 10,000 needles beast, did not feel anything special about this voice. He was rather calm. Facing Lin Feng and the rest, the 10,000 needles beast took a deep breath and asked, "You really don't want that half of the Saint Monarch fruit?" Hearing this, Lin Feng laughed involuntarily. "What do you think?" The group fell into silence again. "If there's nothing else, we'll take our leave first." Shaking his head slightly, Lin Feng said to the 10,000 needles beast, keep that half of the Saint Monarch fruit for yourself." After that, the group of people stopped in mid-air and flew away again. "I agree to cooperate with you." The 10,000 needles beast immediately flew into the air, and its basin-sized oval figure quickly chased after Lin Feng and the rest. Hearing the 10,000 needles beast's words, Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing all stopped and looked at the figure behind them in surprise. Why did it suddenly change its mind? When the latter arrived in front of him, Lin Feng handed the half of the Saint King fruit that he had taken away back to the 10,000 needles beast. With a faint smile, he said, "Since you want to cooperate, you can keep this half of the Saint King fruit." The half of the Saint Monarch fruit that was taken away was recovered and merged back to its original size. The 10,000 needles beast's aura also doubled. Its gaze towards Lin Feng was mixed with a trace of gratitude. "That's right." A giant wolf's head blocked the 10,000 needles beast's gaze. The three-eyed giant wolf laughed. "If you had agreed to cooperate earlier, you wouldn't have been injured." Its laughter was mixed with a trace of depression. After all, it was also injured in this battle. Although its injuries were not serious and were only superficial, it was not a masochist. It would be best if it did not get injured. Injuries. After a moment of silence, Lin Feng said to the two spirits, "There may be many more battles to come. Let me heal your injuries first." Confusion flashed in the eyes of the two spirits. They looked at Lin Feng in confusion. Heal how? Could it be that Lin Feng was a doctor? Or an even rarer alchemist? However, Lin Feng's action made the two spirits overturn their thoughts. Lin Feng flew to the three-eyed giant wolf's side and slowly stroked its injured fur. "Don't move." The three-eyed giant wolf, who was about to move, immediately stopped. "This is..." Looking at Lin Feng in shock, the three-eyed giant wolf opened its mouth wide. "The power of the law of life?" On the side, the 10,000 needles beast's reaction was even more exaggerated than the three-eyed giant wolf. Its eyes were wide open, and its clear eyes were full of shock. The spikes on its body were trembling, and its breathing was heavy. Its eyes were burning as if it had seen a treasure. After a while, Lin Feng slowly withdrew his hand and smiled. "It's done." Moving its limbs, the three-eyed giant wolf was even more surprised. "You recovered so quickly. How was it?" "I didn't disappoint you, did I?" Smiling, Lin Feng turned his gaze to the 10,000 needles beast and flew over. "If you believe me, let me heal your injuries. Of course, if you don't believe me, I won't force you." Compared to the three-eyed giant wolf, the 10,000 needles beast was more vigilant. It was highly guarded against humans. I believe you." Under Lin Feng's quiet gaze, the 10,000 needles beast said with difficulty. Lin Feng was a little puzzled by the 10,000 needles beast's abnormality, but he didn't think too much about it. He stretched out a finger and touched the 10,000 needles beast's palm. This was the only place where there were no spikes. Lin Feng slowly used the law of life as he said, "Your injuries are more serious than the old wolf's, so it will take a little longer." The 10,000 needles beast instinctively nodded, but it didn't listen to Lin Feng's words. Instead, it narrowed its eyes and revealed a look of enjoyment. Noticing that the law of life was being consumed several times faster than before, Lin Feng didn't think too much about it. He only thought that the 10,000 needles beast's injuries were more serious, so it needed to consume more law of life. About a quarter of an hour later, Lin Feng stopped and withdrew his finger. He smiled and said, "It's done." "That's it?" The 10,000 needles beast reluctantly opened its eyes and asked regretfully. It suddenly felt that if its injuries were more serious, it would be better. That way it could absorb more law of life. Jing Ting, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly let out a soft cry. Her eyes fell on the 10,000 needles beast in surprise. "Lin Feng, did you notice that the 10,000 needles beast's aura seems to have grown a little?" Women had always been the most attentive. Although the change in the 10,000 needles beast wasn't obvious, it was still noticed by Jing Ting. With Jing Ting's reminder, Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf, and Huang Wenbing all looked at the 10,000 needles beast and noticed a trace of abnormality. Being stared at strangely by everyone, the 10,000 needles beast lowered its head in embarrassment and said weakly, "I just absorbed a little law of life." "Absorbing law of life can increase your strength?" Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing looked at each other. Chapter 761. The puzzled Lin Feng's group immediately turned their gazes to the three-eyed giant wolf. Feeling the gazes of Lin Feng's group, the three-eyed giant wolf said helplessly, "Don't look at me, I don't know either." It only had a smattering of knowledge regarding medicine spirits, and was far less knowledgeable about artifact spirit. After all, it was an artifact spirit and naturally understood artifact spirit. As for matters regarding medicine spirits, it had only heard rumors and was unclear about many things. 10,000 needles per beast, tell me, what's going on? The three-eyed giant wolf glanced at the 10,000 needles per beast and asked. Since it had decided to cooperate with Lin Feng's group, the 10,000 needles per beast no longer hid anything. Moreover, it wanted to absorb more of the law of life from Lin Feng, so it would not be worth it if Lin Feng was unhappy by deliberately concealing it. A soft voice rang out from its mouth, "To us medicine spirits, the power of the laws of life is like a great tonic. Can help us increase our strength and make heavenly resources evolve. As long as we have enough power of the laws of life, we can even devour our own kind to constantly evolve and become first-rate heavenly resources in the end." "Amazing!" Jing Ting exclaimed. The great thousand world was full of wonders. The combat strength of herb spirits was weaker than artifact spirits of the same level, but they had an advantage that artifact spirits could not compare to, which was that they could evolve by refining the law of life, which was equivalent to having an additional evolution path. After explaining the law of life, the herb spirit stuck out its tongue and licked its lips, its small eyes filled with desire. "Can you let me absorb some more of the law of life?" The feeling of increasing its strength made it extremely intoxicated. Billions of years ago, it had already advanced to a grade 2 herb spirit, but billions of years later, it stopped at grade 2 and the increase in strength was extremely limited. The law of life it absorbed from Lin Feng just now was worth billions of years of cultivation. "It's not impossible to let you absorb some of the law of life." Looking at the eager 10,000 needles per beast with a smile, Lin Feng said slowly, "However, you have to take out something in exchange, right?" The 10,000 needles per beast's face turned bitter. It was only a level 2 herb spirit. Other than the Saint Monarch fruit, it had nothing else. What else could it take out to exchange? However, what Lin Feng said was not unreasonable. There was no free lunch in this world. If you want to get something, you have to pay a price. Under the gazes of Lin Feng, the three-eyed giant wolf, Jing Ting, and Huang Wenbing, the 10,000 needles per beast's fluctuating expression was finally replaced by a wisp of determination. At that moment it had made an extremely important decision in its heart. As long as you promise to absorb the law of life for me in the future and help me evolve, I promise to stay by your side forever. Moreover, I can give you half of the will contained in the Saint Monarch fruit transformed from the law of life. No medicine spirit could resist the temptation of the law of life. Even a first-grade medicine spirit was no exception. The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast was only a first-grade medicine spirit. Its desire for the law of life was even greater than that of a first-grade medicine spirit. For this reason, it did not hesitate to bet everything it had. If it lost, it would lose everything, including its life. If it won, it could evolve into a top first-grade medicine spirit. Hearing this, Lin Feng was stunned. Before the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast spoke, he had guessed what it would say, but he did not guess the answer. The three-eyed giant wolf seemed to be even more anxious than Linfeng. Seeing that Linfeng was still in a daze, it urged in a low voice, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and agree." Awakened by the three-eyed giant wolf's words, Linfeng hurriedly said, "Okay, it's decided. Paying a bit of the law of life to pick up a first-grade medicine spirit for free. Such a good thing could not be found anywhere else. Moreover, this first-grade medicine spirit not only had the battle prowess of a titled Saint King, but it could also continuously grow the Saint Monarch fruit. Having it was equivalent to having a long-term meal ticket, and they would not have to worry about the Saint Monarch fruit in the future. This was definitely the greatest gain Linfeng's group had obtained since entering the desolate origin land. With a thought, Linfeng opened his palm and extracted half of the law of life from his body. He condensed it into a ball and sent it to the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast's mouth. He smiled and said, "This should be enough for you to absorb for a while, right?" Nodding its head like a chicken pecking at rice, the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast was pleasantly surprised. It's enough for me to absorb for at least a month." Nodding slightly, Linfeng secretly sighed in relief. He could still bear this rate of absorption. "Since you're going to follow me in the future, I'll give you a new name. It feels a little awkward to keep calling you 10,000 needle pine spiky beast." After the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast swallowed all the law of life, Linfeng withdrew his hand and said, "How about 10,000 needle pine spiky beast?" "Okay." The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast nodded without hesitation. It was not satisfied with this name. As long as it did not sound bad, there was no problem. After dealing with the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast, Linfeng turned his head and looked at the three-eyed giant wolf. He asked, "Old wolf, where do we go next?" Lowering its head and thinking, the three-eyed giant wolf did not have an idea. It turned its head and looked at the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast. The three-eyed giant wolf's eyes suddenly lit up. It lowered its voice and asked, 10,000 needle pine, do you remember Jiutian?" The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast felt uncomfortable being stared at by the three-eyed giant wolf. It said in surprise, "You actually dare to have ideas about him? He's a level 2 tool spirit. I'm also a level 2 tool spirit. Why wouldn't I dare?" The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast's tone made the three-eyed giant wolf very unhappy. It was very unconvinced. "Don't forget that you, a level 2 medicine spirit, also lost to me." After refuting the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast, the three-eyed giant wolf's expression became serious. "Maybe I'm not its opponent alone, but if you and I work together, how can it resist? If a level 2 tool spirit and a level 2 medicine spirit work together, even if the opponent was a level 2 tool spirit, they had the confidence to fight. And Jiutian was only a level 2 tool spirit. They had no reason to be afraid." After seriously considering the three-eyed giant wolf's suggestion, the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast nodded and said, "If we work together, we do have a chance to defeat it." "Good, then it's decided." After getting the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast's approval, the three-eyed giant wolf's confidence suddenly rose. It laughed and said, "Let's go. Our target this time is Jiutian." A few figures of different sizes immediately flew over the purple stone bamboo forest. On the way, Linfeng asked curiously, "Is Jiutian the tool spirit of a level 2 innate spiritual treasure?" In response to Linfeng's questions, the three-eyed giant wolf always told him everything it knew. It was the same this time. The three-eyed giant wolf nodded and said, "This is the edge of the barren source land. There are very few level 2 tool spirits or level 2 medicine spirit. Jiutian is the only level 2 tool spirit that has been born in countless years. It can be called the overlord of the fluorescent forest. Its original form is the 9 heavens sacred sword, a level 2 innate spiritual treasure." After a pause, a touch of pride flashed in its eyes. However, now that this wolf king has advanced to a level 2 tool spirit, It will no longer be the only level 2 tool spirit in the fluorescent forest. Tisk, what's so great about it? The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast disdained the three-eyed giant wolf's pride. I'm the only level 2 medicine spirit in the fluorescent forest for countless years. The three-eyed giant wolf held its breath and said fiercely, So what if you're a level 2 medicine spirit? You still can't beat me. Retracting its gaze from the 10,000 needle pine spiky beast, the three-eyed giant wolf said longingly, If I can devour Jiotian, then my strength will increase to a level 2 medium tool spirit. Humans were never satisfied, and tool spirits were the same. They also yearned to become a top level 1 tool spirit one day. Let's wait until you've devoured Jiotian. The 10,000 needle pine spiky beast interrupted the three-eyed giant wolf's fantasy at an inappropriate time. After flying for about a day and a half, the group arrived at their destination. In the center of the fluorescent forest, there was a towering mountain, a 9 heavens cloud stream. Looking at the towering mountain, listening to the sound of the waterfall below, and breathing in the fresh and fragrant air, Lin Feng and the others felt as if they had arrived at a fairyland. This was a good place. No wonder it could give birth to a level 2 innate spiritual treasure, 9 heavens, sacred sword. Look, boss, what's that? Huang Wenbing, who was standing beside Lin Feng, suddenly pointed to a white mist not far from the 9 heavens cloud stream in surprise. In fact, the location of these clouds was the real 9 heavens cloud stream. That towering mountain was called 9 Heavens Mountain, named after the 9 heavens cloud stream. Hearing Huang Wenbing's exclamation, Lin Feng and the others looked in the direction he pointed. They saw layers of clouds, under the bright sun, refracting charming rainbow-colored rays of light, like a huge rainbow hanging in the mountain stream. The giant waterfall at the top of the mountain was flowing with clear water. The water flowed down from the top of the mountain, penetrating through the clouds as if it was falling from the 9 heavens. The scenery could be said to be one of the best in the world, making everyone unable to take their eyes off it. Splash! The steaming waterfall splashed countless waves on the surface of the lake at the foot of the mountain. The white waves were like bubbles. However, what attracted everyone's attention the most was a huge longsword in the middle of the waterfall. The tip of the sword went straight to the bottom of the lake, while the hilt was hidden in the clouds. The body of the sword was immersed in the waterfall, constantly enduring the impact of the water. In the lingering clouds, the long sword appeared and disappeared, giving people a mysterious feeling. Hum! 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 The long sword that traversed the sky was like a heart, vibrating rhythmically. Every time it vibrated, it would release a rainbow-colored light, and a leisurely sound would be heard. Feeling the aura that the long sword unconsciously emitted, Lin Feng suddenly felt his heart palpitate. This was the second-rate connate spiritual treasure, the 9 heavens sacred sword. The mysterious, majestic, and domineering 9 heavens sacred sword? If this was a second-rate connate spirit treasure, then this second-rate connate spirit treasure was a little too strong. The three-eyed giant wolf's jade water sword had also evolved into a second-rate connate spiritual treasure, but compared to this longsword that seemed to be able to cut the sky in half, it was as tender as a baby. Oh no! The three-eyed giant wolf and the 10,000 needles beast's expressions changed drastically. The three-eyed giant wolf's eyes widened. A first-rate connate spiritual treasure, the 9 heavens sacred sword, has evolved into a level 1 weapon spirit. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.